Hey guys, how you doing you all? In this video we are going to see part 2 of what if Ash was actual smart and caught more Pokemon early. And please do check out story named Rising Ash, an anime rewrite by Anarchy Gale. And make sure to leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get into the video. On the path leading towards Pewter City, the sun shone bright. Lee down on a scene as nefarious as they came. 3 figures, a red-haired woman, a blue-haired man, and a cat-like Pokemon, toiled away, driving shovels into the dirt of the road as they excavated a deep pit. Team Rocket's Jessie smirked as she tossed another shovelful of dirt to the side of the path. To protect the world from devastation, she began. James grinned as he heard his cue. To unite all peoples within our nation. He added in, waiting as Jessie joined for the next line in their motto. To denounce the evils of truth and love. The chimed together. To extend our reach to the stars above. Jessie, James, Nyarth, Meowth shouted, stabbing his shovel into the earth angrily. Don, yous two ever quit yappin'. Jessie and James shrank back in embarrassment before Jessie spoke. Meowth's right, she agreed. If those twerps are headed for Pewter City, they'll have to come through here. James nodded. And they'll fall right into our trap. He finished, slamming his fist into his open palm. Then we can take their Pokemon for the boss. Again with this boss of yours. The trio of Team Rocket blinked, turning and staring at Ash and Misty. The pair of trainers stood a few feet back, arms crossed and bemused expressions on their faces. Care to explain? Ash asked. Team Rocket looked among themselves, then shook their heads. All right then, we'll just be on our way then, yeah. Team Rocket nodded quietly. The villainous trio watched as Ash and Misty casually walked past them and carried on down the path. Eventually, Meowth frowned, leaping up to smack Jessie and James upside their heads. Why'd ya just let 'em through like dat? The feline demanded. Jessie growled under her breath. It's not like you did anything either, you mangy furball. She bit out. James sighed. Let's just get to the balloon, he muttered. Maybe we can head them off on the other side of town when they decide to move on. Ash couldn't help but laugh as he and Misty made their way towards Pewter City. Rapidly approaching the outskirts of town. I can't believe those 3. He chuckled. I mean really, how obvious can you get? They do seem kinda silly sometimes, Misty giggled. But we have to remember they are professional criminals. They might be a lot more dangerous than they look. Ash's laughter died off as he stopped walking, rubbing his chin. I suppose, he agreed, if reluctantly. Before looking around at the view from the ledge they'd stopped on. Hey, how about a quick break? I could use a drink. Misty smiled, sitting down on a large boulder at the very edge of the ledge as she fished about in her bag. Good idea, she said, pulling out 2 water bottles and tossing one to Ash. Gotta stay hydrated after all. Any chance you could do that without sitting on my merchandise? Misty yelped in fright at the sudden voice as Ash spluttered, the sudden shock causing him to choke on his water for a moment. Glancing just over the ledge, the pair spotted. An older man sat cross-legged at the base of the rise his spiked hair and ragged beard a deep slate gray color with streaks of silver speckled within. His eyes were shadowed by the brim of his deep red hat. His torso covered by a simple faded yellow tank top that left his thick, muscled arms bare. Sorry sir. Misty apologized as Ash slid down the ledge, quickly following after him. She bowed slightly before the man after making her way in front of him. I didn't realize. The man grunted gruffly, but gave her a smile anyway. No harm done. Pewter's always been known as the sturdy city of stone. And the stones from around here are as hardy as they come. The name's Flint. Ash looked around at the various stones, pebbles, rocks, boulders, and even shards arranged on Flint's seemingly makeshift store. An old bookcase leaned against the ridge holding most of his merchandise, each item bearing a price tag. So what's the old Pewter gym leader doing out here selling rocks? He asked callously. Flint flinched as though struck, and Misty glanced at Ash in question. What do you mean, Ash? She asked curiously. Ash looked back at Flint passively. Flint Stonewall, right? He asked bluntly, and Flint looked away. You retired to go train somewhere and left the gym to your eldest son, Brock. Flint sighed, reaching up to pull off his hat and the, apparently, fake beard attached to it. How'd you know? He asked dejectedly. Ash shrugged. You seem pretty proud of Pewter to be all the way out here. Sure, Maybe you were just selling rocks to tourists, but then why not stay where the action is in town? He paused, looking Flint directly in his narrow eyes. Plus, you didn't change your name. It wasn't hard to guess. Misty blinked owlishly at Ash. Impressive, she muttered. Flint stared up at Ash in disbelief before sighing. All right, what do you want? He asked dejectedly. Ash frowned in confusion. Pardon, for your silence, Flint explained, as though it should be obvious. What do you want from me? To keep quiet. I'm not ready to face my children, not yet. So I need you to keep my identity quiet. Ash stared at the man for a time before smirking. Nothing, he said simply, holding up his hand as Flint made to speak. No, I'm not about to blackmail you. That's just wrong. You're obviously working up your courage to face something difficult, so who am I to interfere? Flint and Misty stared at Ash in disbelief as the young trainer began casually looking over the stones on sale. Is he for real? Flint asked eventually. From what I've seen so far. Misty answered, sighing, though she hid her smile. Yeah, he is. How much for the big boulder over there? Ash asked suddenly, pointing to the side of the road even as he held a smaller stone up to his eyes with his other hand. Flint glanced to where Ash had pointed, spotting the largest but also the heaviest boulder in the area a good few feet from the path. Well, I did have it marked for 10,000, he mused, scratching his chin. But that's mostly because I never expected anyone to buy something that big. Ash walked over, casually handing Flint some money as he tossed one of he smaller stones in the air and caught it over and over. I'll take this, he said, gesturing with the smaller stone. And if you let me train using that boulder, you can keep and sell whatever I manage to break off. Deal. Flint and Misty once again stared at Ash in confusion as the trainer pocketed his purchase. Sure kid, Flint muttered as he tucked the money away in his hat, once again placing it upon his head. This time sans beard. But, if you don't mind my asking, what kind of training? Ash smirked. The kind that lets me beat your son, he said simply before walking off. Flint watched him as Misty sighed and took a seat. Aren't you gonna join him? Flint asked curiously as the redhead once again drank from her canteen. Nah, Misty sighed. I'm not really taking the gym challenge myself, so there's no real point. I'll help out if he asks I guess, but something tells me Ash would rather train under his own strength. Flint nodded in understanding, sitting back to watch. Ash circled the boulder he had picked out, his gaze wandering over its smooth surface. He stopped eventually, nodding to himself in satisfaction before turning around and releasing his Pokémon, sending Pikachu to stand with them a moment later. Alright then guys, he began, pacing in front of his Pokémon as their attention turned to him. We'll be going up against the pewter gym next. That means rock types. He paused as his Pokémon looked between one another. I know, we're not exactly set up for a battle with rock types. That's why we're gonna train a bit before we get there. Pikachu. H smiled as his first Pokémon and trusted partner stepped up readily. I want you to work on your double kick attack, he instructed, pointing to one side of the boulder. 2 quick kicks with your hind legs. Should be easy enough, right? Pikachu let out a cry of determination and rushed off, already leaping at the boulder and twisting his body around to practice the kicking move. Ash nodded proudly. Beedrill, he called, and his newly caught Princess Beedrill buzzed forward readily. Do you remember your Harden ability from your Kakuna stage? He waited as Beedrill seemed to ponder for a moment before buzzing an affirmative. Nodding. Focus that into your stingers, and strike the boulder. Keep practicing this, and a rock smash attack should be easy enough. Beedrill buzzed loudly, giving off a proud war cry of sorts before taking its own space, striking at the boulder over and over. Ash watched for a moment before turning to the remaining 3 members of his team. Now then, he began. I don't think there'll be much you 3 can do in this battle. But that doesn't mean you're getting off scot-free. He chuckled as his Pokémon let out sounds of disappointment before rallying again when he cleared his throat. Butterfree, I want you working on your powder moves. Try and get some more control on how they land. I don't like trusting the wind to not blow the powders away. While you're at it, get some meditation in. We're gonna need your psychic abilities in the future. Butterfree chirped and gave a salute. Spearow, Pidgeotto, you both need to work on your speed. For that, you're playing tag. He paused as the two bird Pokémon shared a confused look, smirking. Think of it this way. Pidgeotto, if you can catch Spearow, then you're pretty fast. But Spearow, if you're caught, then you're not fast enough. The same goes the other way. In short, catch, don't get caught. Go. With that, the final 3 members of Ash's team took off. Spearow and Pidgeotto took to the skies above before darting after one another, each attempting to give the other a wing slap on the back before darting away again. Butterfree took position above a small stream further along the ledge they had come from. Hovering above where the water pooled before flowing onwards and attempting to direct its sleep powder attack as it fell, taking chances to meditate to the sounds of water flowing around it. Ash nodded in satisfaction. Good, he called to his team, shrugging out of his overshirt. Now it's hardly fair that you train alone. Which means when you train, I train. With that declaration, Ash made his way to a sturdy-looking tree where he could oversee each of his Pokémon even as he leapt up, gripping a strong branch as he began a series of chin-ups. Each time he pulled himself up, he paused for a beak to shout encouragement and instructions to his team. Good Pikachu, he shouted when Pikachu managed to land a solid second kick on the boulder, using the hit to spring backwards before stumbling on the landing. Use your tail more, it'll help you direct yourself in the air. Yes Beedrill, he cried as Beedrill managed to break a chip of stone from the boulder. Pardon why? Are stingers more and focus on striking one point again. Focus, Butterfree. He soothed as a gust of wind scattered Butterfree's latest attempt at controlling the powders it scattered from its wings. Breath deeply. In for 2, out for 2, and try again. Faster, you two. He yelled when Spearow whipped past him, only to squawk in indignation as Pidgeotto slapped it across the back and darted away. Try and reduce your air drag as you fly. Use the slipstream to catch up. As the day dragged on, Ash made sure each of his Pokémon rested to avoid injury. During each rest period, however, he took the chance to scan each Pokémon with his Pokédex, checking on their progress. The first he did this with was Pikachu, spurred on when he noticed his partner's tail wave over a space in the air that seemed to shimmer just afterwards. That alone would have caught his attention, but when Pikachu used that same shimmering air to seemingly instinctively leap into a second double kick and break a good chunk of rock from the boulder, he called for break time. The next he checked on was Pidgeotto, as she seemed more revitalized than anyone else after her brief respite. Butterfree and Beedrill came soon after. As Ash noticed Butterfree's eyes gaining an eerie light as it meditated while Beedrill's attacks seemed to grow in ferocity. Spearow showed the least change from his training, but Ash checked on him just the same. What the Pokédex showed him was surprising to say the least. Over and over Ash looked over the information in front of him, calling an end to training and setting up his Pokémon's lunch as he sat down with Misty and Flint again. What's that you've got there? Flint asked curiously. My Pokémon's data, Ash muttered in answer, before handing the device to Misty. I'm not reading this wrong, am I? Misty blinked in surprise, taking the Pokédex and reading through the information it showed. Species, Pikachu, given name, N.A. Gender, male, ability, static. Pipe, trainer, Ash Ketchum. Registered caretaker, Professor Oak, Pallet Town. Known moves, Thundershock, quick attack, double team. Double kick, thunder wave, light screen. Species, Pidgeotto, given name, N.A. Gender, female, ability, keen eye. Trainer, Ash Ketchum. Registered caretaker, Professor Oak, Pallet Town. Known moves, quick attack, sand attack, gust. Mirror move, wing attack, roost. Species, Butterfree, given name, N.A. Gender, male, ability, compound eyes. Trainer, Ash Ketchum. Registered caretaker, Professor Oak, Pallet Town. Known moves, gust, psybeam, tackle. Sleep powder, stun spore, poison powder. Species, Beedrill, given name, N.A. Gender, female, ability, sniper. Trainer, Ash Ketchum. Registered caretaker, Professor Oak, Pallet Town. Known moves, poison sting, twineedle, peck. Rock smash, fury attack, focus energy. Species, Spearow, given name, N.A. Gender, male, ability, keen eye. Trainer, Ash Ketchum. Registered caretaker, Professor Oak, Pallet Town. Known moves, peck, growl, leer. Focus energy, fury attack. As she reached the end of the readout, Misty blinked owlishly before handing the decks back to Ash. Wow, she muttered, before shaking her head to clear her thoughts. That's impressive. So I'm not reading it wrong? Ash asked again, scrolling through the data one last time. I knew they were all working hard, but I didn't think we were this strong yet. You should be proud of yourself, kid, Flint praised, chuckling. It took me a while to get those kinds of results from training when I was your age. Your Pokémon have a lot of potential. He paused, rubbing his chin in thought. Though you may want a bit more variety in your team. I can tell you're not going for a typed speciality, so be aware of your weaknesses before they bring an end to you. Ash nodded, taking in the advice as he thought. Thank you, he said in appreciation, standing as his Pokémon finished their meals. Well, we should probably get into town before dark. I need to visit the Pokémon Center before the gym. Misty smiled as she too stood. Good idea, she said in agreement. You get everyone ready, I'll tidy up. Thank you for your help, Mr. Flint. Flint chuckled. What help? He asked casually. Now be off with you. And remember, not a word. Ash and Misty nodded, waving goodbye to Flint as they made their way into Pewter City proper. Flint sighed as he sat back, considering things. Good kids. Could you give my Pokémon a checkup, please? Ash asked as he placed a tray on the desk of the Pokémon Center, each of Hi's Pokéballs set into a slot as Pikachu sat next to them and yawned. The nurse behind the counter smiled warmly. Of course, young man. She said kindly. Taking the tray, she smirked slightly as she saw Ash staring at her inquisitively. Something else you'd like to ask me? Ash nodded. Are you related to the Joy in Viridian City, by any chance? The nurse chuckled. Yes, she answered. It's a tea of a family tradition for us Joys to become Pokémon nurses and doctors. You know, the first ever professional Pokémon nurse was a Joy. Ash blinked for a moment before smiling. That's so cool, he said enthusiastically. Well, I guess that means my Pokémon are in the best of care then. Thank you very much. Nurse Joy blushed and waved him off. You flatterer, she laughed. Go on now, I'll call for you when the checkup is complete. I suggest grabbing a bite to eat at our cafe, the food is rather good. Ash nodded again. Thank you, I think I will. With one last wave he turned and left, joining up with Misty as they headed towards the center's in-house cafe and took an empty booth by the window. After just a moment, a waitress approached them, taking their orders and leaving them to talk. Feeling confident, Misty asked as the waitress walked away. Ash nodded, then sighed and shook his head. To be honest, he asked, looking into his palms. I don't know. Even with our training, we're still weak to rock-type Pokémon. Brock's gonna have a big advantage. Misty nodded. That's true, she agreed, pausing as the waitress returned with their drinks. But you've been preparing for that. Which means there's still a chance, right? She took a sip of her soda as Ash nodded. And remember, there's no shame in forfeiting if you think your Pokémon are gonna get hurt. Again Ash nodded. I know, he replied, smiling as their meals were delivered to the table and he grabbed his rice bowl. Oh well, no use getting myself down before we even try. Let's eat. Misty chuckled as Ash began shoveling his rice into his mouth, eating voraciously. They ate in comfortable silence, both letting out a satisfied sigh as they finished and sat back in their chairs. Nothing like a warm meal after a few days of camping. Misty mused aloud, and Ash nodded silently in agreement before standing as Nurse Joy's voice rang through the building on the speaker system. Will Trainer Ash Ketchum please report to the front desk? The nurse's voice asked. Your Pokémon are ready for collection. Ash stood, dropping some money on the table to pay for the food and making sure to leave the waitress a tip. Let's go, he said as Misty stood to join him. I wanna challenge the gym before dark if I can. Misty nodded. Sounds like a plan, she agreed, before holding out one of her own Pokeballs. Quote, are you sure you don't want to borrow one of my water types? Ash shook his head. Thanks, but no. That'd be like cheating, and I hate cheating. Misty nodded in understanding, tucking her Pokeball in the pocket of her bag as the duo made her way to the front desk. Ash smiled as the nurse came out to meet them, his Pokemon on a tray in her hands. He laughed as Pikachu leapt into his arms before clambering onto his shoulders. Hey buddy. Ash chuckled, reaching up to scratch under Pikachu's chin, causing the mouse Pokemon to let out a happy squeaking noise. Your Pokémon are all in top condition, Nurse Joy said with a smile as she set the tray down, and Ash began collecting his Pokeballs. Though he did notice something strange. Ash blinked, the last Pokeball in his hand. Strange? He asked, voice tinged with concern. Joy nodded. Yes, but it's not harmful in any way, she explained. In fact, if anything it seems to be helping your Pokémon grow even stronger. Misty blinked in confusion. What do you mean? She asked curiously. Joy smiled. Well, she began. There seems to be a pathogen of some kind that's spread between your Pokémon. We think it originated from your Beedrill, but has since spread to the rest of your team. Now, she said quickly as Ash made to speak up. It's not harmful, like I said. It seems your Pokémon are gaining strength faster than others of your kind. Your Pikachu in particular has a much higher threshold for electrical energy than previously recorded in other members of its species. Ash blinked owlishly as he processed the information. So they're okay? He asked eventually. It's not going to hurt them, is it? Joy chuckled. No, young man, it's not, she assured him. We've taken some samples from each of your Pokémon and sent them to be tested. And we'll let their registered caretaker know the results so it can be passed alongside to you. Ash smiled, placing the last of his Pokeballs on his belt. Thank you, he said gratefully, before looking to Misty. Let's go. If we hurry we should still make it. Misty shook her head, pushing the thoughts of a helpful virus to the back of her mind. Right behind you, she called as Ash turned and ran off. Rushing to keep up, Joy watched the two trainers for a moment before heading into the back of the center, turning into a small storage room. Closing the door behind her, she ached behind a crate of Pokeballs and pressed a hidden button, opening a secret door into a hidden room. As she walked in, lights flickered on above, revealing a large screen set into the back wall as well as a number of machines. A glass case held a darkened mannequin holding what could only be described as a strange uniform within. Joy turned to the terminal connected to the large screen, pull in. G up the phone function and making a call. The samples have been sent. Yes sir, we've sent the secondary set to Oak. No sir, they didn't suspect a thing. Understood sir. Glory to Team Rocket. Ash and Misty paused at the front desk of the pewter gym, blinking in surprise at the young boy sitting behind the desk as he stared expectantly at them. He had spiky, light brown hair and narrow eyes, earring a two-tone striped green polo shirt. Well, the boy asked expectantly, which one of you is challenging Brock today? Ash shook his head quickly and stepped forwards. Me, Ash Ketchum, from Pallet Town. The boy nodded, holding his hand out as he looked to the terminal in front of him again. Pokédex please, he said politely, typing rapidly with his free hand. When Ash handed the device over, the boy took it and slotted it into the terminal, typing something for a moment before removing it and handing it back. Your challenge has been registered in the league systems, the boy explained, before pointing to his left. Challengers can go this way. Please leave your bag and any non-essentials in the lockers provided before entering the battlefield. Brock will be ready for you. He paused, standing and stepping out from behind the desk as a red light flicked on above him. He gestured to Misty. Miss, if you'd like to follow me to the spectator stands. Misty nodded. Of course, she replied readily, smiling to Ash. Good luck, she called as she followed the boy to the stands. Ash stood in the reception for a moment, watching Misty and the boy go before nodding to himself. Turning on his heel, he wasted little time, stepping into the locker room and tossing his backpack into one of the lockers before heading straight for the battlefield. As he expected, the field was cast in darkness as he stepped out. The floor beneath his feet covered in soft soil and gravel. As he stepped up to his position on the battlefield, he noted a number of large, rugged boulders in the low light. Welcome to the pewter gym. A stern voice called out as the lights flicked on, illuminating the stony battlefield and revealing Brock on the opposite end of the room, sat cross-legged on a flat-topped boulder. Dressed in a pair of brown cargo pants, an orange shirt, and a green vest, he held a very imposing presence. I am Brock, the pewter gym leader called. My Pokémon are recognized foe. Are there rock-solid power and true grit determination? Ash smiled, deciding to answer in kind. I am Ash Ketchum, he shouted back. I aim to be recognized as a true Pokémon master. Across the field, Brock smiled as he stood up. An admirable dream, he praised. Let's see if you have what it takes. As Brock spoke, a machine lifted a tray of Pokeballs to his side from below. 2 Pokeballs sat on top. Brock took them both and stepped closer to the field. Forest, if you will. Ash watched as the green-shirted young man from before stepped up to the referee's podium. This will be an official 2 versus 2 match between challenger Ash and leader Brock. Forest called out. Pokémon will remain in battle until they are unable to continue. Recalling your Pokémon is counted as a forfeit of that Pokémon. Any outside interference will be met with disqualification. Do both parties understand the rules? I understand, Ash called out as Brock nodded. With a responding nod from Forest, a white flag was waved, signaling the start of the battle. Brock moved first, flinging one of his Pokeballs onto the field and releasing his first Pokémon in a burst of blue-white light. What appeared from the light looked to be a small, sentient rock creature with a pair of thin but powerful arms. Sharp eyes flared out at Ash from a rugged face as it thumped heavily against the ground, ready for battle. A Geodude, Ash mused, grabbing his own Pokeball. Let's go for strike and retreat then. Beedrill. Ash's own Pokémon appeared with a buzzing war cry and a flash of light, buzzing around in the air above the battlefield. Brock watched the insectoid Pokémon for a moment before letting out a disappointed sigh. I had hoped for better, he mused to himself, and Ash bristled. Seems like you're just another big-headed novice. Geodude, rock throw. Ash watched silently as Brock's Geodude drove its fists into the ground, coming up with a number of pointed stones clutched in its hands which T began flinging at Beedrill with surprising power. Without his command, Beedrill began dodging between the stones, smashing its stingers into any that got too close and pulverizing them midair. Brock stared in surprise before smiling. Maybe I was too quick to judge, he laughed. Ash nodded. Yeah, a little, he shot back before reaching up to turn his hat backwards. Now then, let's get serious. Beedrill, focus energy. Rock throw. Geodude. The battle raged on, far more intense than before, with stones flying through the air as Beedrill darted to and fro, dodging between them and letting them bounce harmlessly off of a clear barrier at the edges of the field. Now Beedrill. Ash cried suddenly. Rock smash. Brock flinched. What? He cried out, watching as Beedrill dove rapidly and drove its stinger directly into Geodude's face, sending his Pokémon rolling backwards from the critical strike. Geodude, use takedown. Geodude quickly recovered, stopping its rolling with its NDS before throwing itself bodily into Beedrill, sending the insectoid Pokémon reeling. It flinched however as the impact damaged itself, holding its own arm tenderly. Before any more commands could be given, Ash's Beedrill dove into combat again, jabbing repeatedly with its stingers in a frenzy. Geodude began moving backwards, attempting to dodge, but flinched each time an attack landed, its stamina whittling away. Defense curl. Geodude. Brock cried, clenching his fist. And bide. Ash frowned in thought as Geodude wrapped its arms around its face, letting Beedrill continue to attack it. Ith a mixture of rock smash and twineedle attacks. Almost too late he registered Brock's second command, shouting to his Pokémon in a panic. Get back, he cried. Beedrill, back off now. Brock smirked. Now Geodude, he shouted. And Geodude's arms opened. Unleash your bide. In a flash of light, Geodude unleashed a burst of energy that slammed into Beedrill and sent it skidding across the dirt floor to land at Ash's feet. Moments later the stony Pokémon wavered in place before collapsing itself. A double knockout. Forest called from the sidelines as Ash and Brock both knelt to tend to their Pokémon. Geodude's bite has knocked out Beedrill, but Geodude has succumbed to the poison from Beedrill's twineedle. This match is a draw. Ash pet Beedrill's head soothingly. Good job, he praised, giving a proud smile before recalling the insect to its ball to rest. He glanced up as a flash of red light signaled Brock doing the same with his Geodude. The rock-type gym leader stood, facing Ash as he did the same. That was very impressive, Brock called, before holding up his second Pokeball. But impressiveness won't be good enough for this next challenge. Go, Onix. Ash watched as, in a blinding flash of white light, a truly massive serpentine Pokémon with skin like rugged boulders appeared. A stony crest extended from atop its chiseled face, with 2 large, piercing eyes staring down at him. An Onix. Huh, Ash mused. Surprisingly fast for its size. But I bet we're faster, Pikachu. He smirked as he looked to his partner, the electric rodent sparking its cheeks in challenge before running onto the field. Your Beedrill did well against Geodude, Brock called out. But my Onix is my strongest Pokémon. Are you sure you want to challenge it with your Pikachu? Ash remained silent as Pikachu let out a determined cry, electricity arcing from its body to scorch the ground. Does that answer your question? He asked with a smirk. I'm not about to back down yet, and neither is Pikachu. Brock nodded. I understand, he relented. Forest, if you would. Forest once again raised his white flag. The battle between Brock's Onix and Ash's Pikachu will begin, now. As soon as the match began, Pikachu blurred forward, leaping into the air and lashing out at Brock's Onix with a rapid double kick to the midsection. Onix let out a roar of pain and fury, whipping its tail around to smack Pikachu away. Brock frowned. You've surprised me today, he mused as Onix focused its energy inwards, hardening its body against attacks. But now I know what you've brought against me. Onix, use your rock throw attack. As Onix twisted its body around, Ash thought quickly. Pikachu, double team, he cried, watching as Pikachu created a number of afterimage duplicates of ITself as it began sprinting around the battlefield. Onix slammed its tail into the earth, sending stones and boulders flying at as many of the duplicates as it could, each time causing one to fade away as one of the projectiles impacted. When the last of the duplicates faded out, Brock frowned in confusion. Wait, where is it? He asked aloud before leaping back as Onix began to thrash about in a panic. Onix, what's wrong? Ash smirked. Blind spot, he said simply, tapping his nose as Onix twisted its body, revealing Pikachu scampering nimbly up its large body. Brock gasped at the sight, gritting his teeth in frustration. The gym leader let out a sigh of relief when Onix decided to slam its back against a particularly large boulder, seeing Pikachu leap away from his Pokémon, only for it to twist in the air. A shimmering screen of light forming beneath its feet for it to spring off of and propel itself straight up to Onix's head. Planting its front paws, Pikachu then twisted around, lashing out with both hind legs in a vicious double kick against Onix's head crest that sent the massive serpent swaying dizzily before it crashed to the ground in defeat. Pikachu leapt from Onix's head as it fell, falling into Ash's waiting arms. Brock stared in disbelief. His prized Pokémon lay on the ground, dazed and unable to continue the battle. Before he could catch himself, Brock found himself chuckling as he made his way into the field. Good work, Onix, he praised as the serpentine creature let out a sad-sounding moan. Don't worry, you've earned a good mud bath tonight. He looked up as Ash knelt down beside him, reaching out to pet Onix's snout. Your Onix is really strong, Ash praised with a smile. I was honestly kinda worried about it when you sent it out. Brock chuckled and sat back. You shouldn't have been, he said. That Pikachu of yours, it's something special, let me tell you. First time I've seen one using double kick. He paused and smirked. First time I've lost to a Beedrill, too. I'm honestly impressed. Ash blushed, rubbing his head in embarrassment. Hee, thanks. They both looked up as Forest cleared his throat, holding a small box carved from stone with a glass window in the lid. Inside, Ash could see a slate-gray pillow, on which sat a shining badge. Brock smiled as he stood. Right, of course. Thanks, Forest. He took the box from the younger boy, who shrugged and stepped back. Ash stood as Brock turned back to him. Ash Ketchum, as proof of your victory at the pewter gym, I am honored to award you with this Boulder badge. Ash smiled as Brock opened the case, allowing him to reach in and take his prize. He held the Boulder badge in his palm, quickly wiping away a tear that threatened to fall as his chest swelled with pride. Thank you, he whispered, closing his fist around the badge. He looked up suddenly as somebody leapt down from the stands, expecting to see Misty approaching. He was surprised, however, at the older man, in the deep red hat and fake graying beard. Well done, kid, Flint said as he reached up to pull his disguise away, causing Forrest to gasp loudly. Brock stared impassively as Flint turned to him, his head low. Son, I'm sorry I took so long. I decided to stop hiding at that stupid stall then, Brock asked, cutting his father off. Flint spluttered in surprise, but Brock just smiled. Welcome home, Dad. Good trip. Flint stared at his son for a moment. He began, before smiling softly. Yes, very good, thank you. Brock nodded before turning to Forrest. The others will be finished soon Forest. Could you pick them up while I go home and start dinner? Forest looked between Brock and Flint before nodding slowly. Sure, see you at home, he said unsurely before jogging out of the gym. Ash watched him go before turning to Brock as he cleared his throat. Would you and your friend care to join us for dinner? Brock asked as Misty made her way over from the direction of the lockers, Ash's back in her hand. She rolled her eyes as she passed it to him and held up the key he'd left in the locker in his rush, and Ash blushed. We'd be delighted, Misty answered for him as they all shared a laugh. Ash smiled as he looked out at the road heading east from Pewter, the mysterious Mount Moon in the distance and his next challenge of Cerulean City Gym beyond that. The sun was still low in the sky, giving them plenty of time to hike to at least Mt. Moon's base before nightfall. Brock and Flint had insisted to host him and Misty that night, and Brock spent the afternoon following dinner teaching Ash a number of ways to care for his Pokémon post-battle, both healthy and rewarding for them. It turned out that Brock's spare time was spent studying how to care for and treat Pokémon of all kinds, as he dreamed of becoming a renowned Pokémon doctor or breeder in his future. Pikachu in particular had enjoyed the massage he'd given it, and Ash learned quite messily that Hi's partner had a craving for ketchup of all things. The young trainer glanced behind him, looking at Misty and Brock as they spoke between themselves. Are you sure about coming with us, Brock? Ash asked. Doesn't the gym need you? Brock shrugged. Not really, he answered easily. I was only really an interim gym leader until my father came back, and Forest is more interested in taking over than I ever was anyway. If Dad decides to retire properly, Forest will take over. Ash nodded, thinking. There were far more Pokémon waiting at Brock's surprisingly large home that apparently belonged to Flint himself. And he'd even had a chance to meet Forest's first Pokémon, a Magnemite, before they'd left. He supposed they really didn't need Brock to run the gym anymore. Are you gonna stand there moping all day? Misty asked suddenly as she started down the path, a bright smile on her face. Come on, you got your first badge, right? Let's go get the second. Brock chuckled as he too set off, putting Ash on the shoulder. Don't worry about it, he said reassuringly. If they need me, they know where to call me. I can always come back. Ash smiled and nodded. Right, he agreed, taking the first steps out of Pewter and quickly taking the lead. Let's go. Hidden in the shrubbery along the sides of the route, Team Rocket watched Ash and his friends closely. Their eyes tracked the three young trainers' movements, watching until they reached the perfect position. Okay, Jessie whispered, holding up her hand. On the count of 3, we leap out and rush them. James and Meowth nodded as they readied themselves. Right, they agreed in unison. 1, 2. The trio tensed, ready to spring out of their hiding spot. 3. I would advise against that. The trio jumped, spinning around in surprise at the distorted voice that had spoken. Jessie's face flushed red, the woman leaping to her feet ready to berate whoever had snuck up on them, only to freeze in place. Is that? James muttered, his eyes wide in fear. It is, Meowth confirmed quietly. Before them stood an imposing figure, clearly feminine, dressed in a long black dress smock embossed with a bright red R on the breast. Long black boots and gloves covered her arms and legs, all of which was contained under a long, flowing white coat, also embossed with a bright red R. The woman's head was hidden completely. Under a white hood connected to her coat, a black plague doctor's mask covering her face. Jessie gulped loudly, shaking visibly. Madam Miasma, she stammered. What a pleasure. How can we help you? The masked woman looked over the trio impassively for a moment before turning on her heel. Come, she ordered simply. You have a new directive. Jessie, James, and Meowth looked between each other before scrambling to follow. They didn't dare disobey, not with one of Team Rocket's elite giving the orders. Ash, Misty, and Brock paused on their track, looking up at the imposing size of Mount Moon before them as they each drank from their own water supplies. There should be a rest stop just outside the entrance to the mountain, Brock said as he tucked his canteen away. I used to see here with my father to train when I was little. It's where we first caught my onyx. Sounds like a nice memory then, Misty mused. Was it dark in the caves? Will we need a flashlight? Ash nodded in agreement. It was a good thought. After all, and they didn't have any Pokémon to his knowledge that could light the way aside from Pikachu, but using lightning attacks to do so could be dangerous. Brock rubbed his chin in thought for a moment before nodding. Yeah, we should probably get some spare batteries for our flashlights before we go in. The caves are home to a lot of Pokémon that prefer the dark, though. So we should be careful not to disturb them. Ash shrugged his backpack off as the group stepped around a large, natural stone barrier, intending to find his flashlight out to keep it ready. He paused, however, as something at the edge of his senses caught his attention. When the entrance to the caves came into view, the young trainer dropped his backpack and sprinted forward suddenly. Misty and Brock hot on his heels. A thin-looking man in a long white lab coat was waving his arms frantically, trying in vain to frighten off a group of small, purplish-blue bat-like Pokemon. With large ears and no distinguishable eyes. Zubat! Brock shouted as he whipped a Pokeball from his belt, summoning his Geodude with practiced ease. They're normally asleep at this time, why are they outside in the daylight? Don't know, Misty answered as her Staryu appeared from its ball. But now's not the time for questions. Ash, on it! Ash cried as his own Pokeball flew from his hand into the air, releasing his Spearow. Rapid Fire Fury Attack, now! Geodude, Rock Throw. Use Swift, Staryu. Without hesitation, the three Pokémon dove into the fray, easily dividing the frenzied Zubat into three smaller, more manageable groups. Spearow dashed from one target to another, attacking with beak and talons until the Zubat in its group turned and fled. Geodude flung stones at its targets with pinpoint accuracy, drawing the creatures to itself before frightening them away with solid rock punches. Staryu scattered the targets with a barrage of star-shaped energy projectiles that banked to track their targets, impacting and scaring them one by one. As the commotion died down, a lone Zubat remained, fluttering back and forth in an obvious daze. Brock walked slowly over to it, catching the creature in his arms as it suddenly succumbed to exhaustion and dropped out of the air. With gentle care, the pewter gym trainer pulled out a spare Pokeball and tapped it to the Zubat's body, capturing the creature easily. Ash rushed over to the scientist's side, kneeling to help him to his feet. Are you okay? He asked in concern, offering his arm once the man was on his feet so that Spearow could perch upon his sleeve. The scientist nodded slowly, reaching up to his face to fix his large round glasses. Yes, I'm all right, thank you, he replied as he scratched the sandy brown peach fuzz gracing his chin. Oh, I hope the Zubat are okay, poor things were so frightened. Why were they attacking you like that? Brock asked as he stepped closer, Geodude at his heels. Yeah, Misty chimed in as Staryu rested beside her. I always thought Zubat liked to stay in their caves in the day. The man nodded. They do, he confirmed. But something has disturbed their home. Some airless person has hung lights all throughout Mount Moon's caves and upset the nocturnal Pokémon. He paused, looking between the three trainers before chuckling nervously. I'm sorry, I haven't even introduced myself, have I? I'm Seymour. I'm studying the Pokémon of Mount Moon for my thesis paper. Nice to meet you, Seymour, Ash said with a smile. I'm Ash. Brock gave a nod of greeting. Brock. And I'm Misty, Misty provided. But who would do such a thing? I don't know. Seymour fretted as he began pacing. I was trying to follow the lights to find the culprits when those Zubat attacked me in their confusion. They're normally such nice Pokémon. Brock hummed in thought as he rubbed his chin. Some people have no consideration for wild Pokémon, he mused. Ash heaved a heavy sigh. I have a feeling I know who it is. He muttered before looking to Misty. $10 says it's Team Rocket again. You think? She asked, looking into the air as she thought. We haven't seen them for a while, I guess. Brock looked between the two in confusion. Care to share the secret? He asked, a mixture of confusion and perhaps a touch of jealousy in his voice. Ash looked to the sky as he considered how to answer. Team Rocket is, he began, trailing off for a moment. They're a group of criminals that fancy themselves masterminds. We've chased them off a couple times now. Misty nodded. Well, we've chased off the same three a couple times, she corrected. From what they said in Viridian Forest, there's more than just those three. Brock nodded. So you think they're following you? He asked. Ash just shrugged. That or we've been very unluckily crossing paths with them by chance every time. Misty crossed her arms and nodded sagely. A very possible explanation, she mused. Brock sighed deeply. They're going to be a recurring nuisance, aren't they? Ash and Misty glanced at each other before nodding. Probably, they said in unison. Seymour looked between the three in confusion before awkwardly clearing his throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but, he paused, gesturing to the opening to the Mount Moon cave system. The problem at hand. Right, Ash muttered, recalling his Spearow. Guess the flashlights aren't needed anymore. Let's go. As the group made their way through the cavernous tunnels of Mount Moon, they made sure to keep their eyes open. Aside from their suspicions regarding Team Rocket's involvement, the bright lights, while useful, was likely upsetting the many dark acclimated Pokémon that lived in the mountain. So Seymour, Brock began. What is it you're researching here anyway? Seymour smiled. I'm researching the theories that Mount Moon is the resting place of an ancient meteorite from the stars, known as the Moon Stone. He explained. Alongside the existence of this Moon Stone, I'd like to research the connections between this legend and the Pokémon that live in the area. Sounds interesting, Ash mused, stepping carefully over the sleeping form of a Geodude. Have you found anything yet? I have. The scientist exclaimed excitedly, barely noticing as Brock gently guided him around the self-same Geodude Ash had avoided. It would seem that the Clefairy that live in the area are rather closely related to the Moon Stone. The group fell silent for a moment as they rounded another bend, scanning the area ahead for any movement. You don't think, Misty began. Maybe they're looking for the Moon Stone. Whoever put these lights up, I mean. Silence fell on the group again as the idea turned over in their minds. Twists and turns blended together as they quartet delved deeper into the caverns, and yet felt no struggle to see as the invading lights pushed any darkness into the edges and corners. It feels weird, Brock muttered. It's always been dark this deep, and you could always hear the Pokémon crawling around. Now, Ash shuddered slightly. Yeah, he agreed. I can almost feel the fear everywhere. The young man paused, squinting slightly as a visibly thick, purple-tinted smoke rolled along the ground ahead of them, spilling out of a crevice in the wall. What's that? Seymour stepped up next to Ash. Looks like a toxic cloud, he mused. It's not spore-based, so it's not a Paris. The Zubat of this area can't expel smog like that, either. Whatever the source is, I think we've found our perpetrators. Here, Brock said, handing out what looked like medical masks. This should help a little with the toxins, but try not to breathe in too much of the smog. The group nodded in understanding, each grabbing a mask and placing it over their mouths and noses. After a moment's thought, Ash grabbed a second and helped Pikachu to put it on. All ready? Ash asked once Pikachu's mask was in place. As the group nodded to him in answer, he moved forward. Let's go then. Ash crept along the wall of the cavern, pausing at the crevice's edge. As the others crowded behind him, the young trainer leaned forward, glancing around the corner with his breath held. As with the rest of the tunnels, the cavern beyond the crevice was lit with strings of bright lamps hung along the outer walls. Stood towards the back of the cavern, with their backs to him, was the all-too-familiar Team Rocket duo, seemingly overseeing the work that their Pokémon were doing as Ekans and coughing repeatedly blasted the wall with potent steaming poisons that melted the rock away and left the hazardous smog rolling along the floor. Any luck on your side? Jessie asked as she moved to inspect the newest patch of fresh rock her Ekans acid had revealed. Ash noticed the gas mask and heavy-duty gloves she wore as she bent down, brushing the stone off with her hand. I can't see any fossils yet. Not yet, James sighed, stepping back and motioning with his hand. The blue-haired man shielded his eyes as coughing spat another mouthful of corrosive sludge at the wall. Are we sure there's even any left? Haven't people been seeing for fossils in this area for years? Quit complaining, Meowth sniped from across the room, and Ash turned to see the feline Pokémon attempting to carefully dig away at the rock with his claws. We got our orders from da boss. And, with her hangin' round, I don't wanna leave empty pod. Ash frowned in thought as the trio seemed to shudder at the thought of failure, backing up slightly. Did you guys hear any of that? He asked, keeping his voice low. Brock nodded. Yes, he muttered. But who could be? Whoever it is, Misty chimed in. She must be pretty scary. They seemed terrified of her. Ash nodded in thought before turning to the fourth member of their group. What do you think, Seymour? He asked, blinking as he realized the scientist had vanished. Seymour. Hey, you three. Ash, Misty, and Brock shared a look before darting to the cavern entrance, watching as Seymour marched right up to Team Rocket. What do you think you're doing here? Fossil excavation was declared illegal when Mount Moon became a protected zone, and those lights are disturbing the Pokémon. Take them down and leave immediately. Team Rocket looked at each other in bewilderment as Seymour continued his tirade before Jessie began cackling. And who are you? She asked bitingly as her Ekans returned to wrap around her leg. There are no authorities around here. Do you know who we are? I don't think he does, Jessie. James chuckled as coughing began to orbit above his head. He's just some nerd who got his britches in a bind, after all. Seymour flinched back at their overconfident tones before steeling himself. If you don't leave this place immediately, I'll be forced to make you. He stammered out, even as his legs visibly shook from the nerves that racked his body. Again, the villainous trio glanced at each other, before all three burst into raucous laughter. You! James barked out between his bouts of laughter. What are you gonna do, Mathis to death? Jessie too. A deep breath as she got her laughter under control before cracking her knuckles menacingly. I think you should prepare for trouble, she warned, grinning viciously. James smirked. You can make that double tilde, he purred excitedly. Ash frowned, grinding his teeth as he marched into the cavern. Mess with him, you mess with me. He yelled angrily, a Pokeball practically leaping into his hand. Us too, Misty cried as she hurried into the cavern with Brock, each holding a Pokeball of their own. Meowth stepped up between his cohorts, claws bared menacingly. Bring it on, ya pesky tuips. He grow. W led out as Ekans and coughing leapt to battle beside him. Get back, Seymour, Ash warned as he tossed his Pokeball, releasing Beedrill into the cavern as it buzzed angrily. Misty's Starmie and Brock's Zubat quickly joined it. Seymour could only nod silently as he backed away, watching the intense stalemate as both sides stared each other down. Ekans coiled itself, ready to spring, and in response, Beedrill began to sharpen its stingers against one another. Zubat flapped closer to the roof of the cavern, and coughing followed, marking its target. Starmie stared impassively as Meowth flexed its paws. The tension in the room seemed to rise, thick in the air like a cloud of choking smoke. Both sides stared the other down, silently daring the other to make the first move. Suddenly, Jessie flung her arm out. Ekans, use your sucker punch attack, she cried, smirking in satisfaction as the purple snake Pokémon flung itself forward, flicking its tail forward in a jabbing motion to strike Beedrill in the chest, sending the insectoid Pokémon reeling backwards. Ash blinked in shock. Wow! He cried in indignation. That Ekans must have been specially bred, Brock mused, a deep scowl on his face as he clenched his fist in anger. No doubt in some underground ring. These guys are worse than you made them sound. What do you mean? Misty asked. Does that really matter right now? Ash shouted, kneeling next to his Beedrill as it pushed itself to its feet and buzzed unsteadily into the air again. We're in the middle of a battle. As Misty and Brock nodded in agreement, James scoffed and rolled his eyes. At least one of them has some common sense, he sneered. Speaking of coughing, use your stockpile technique. Brock's jaw hardened as coughing seemed to inflate on itself. You're despicable, he cried. Horrible. Downright villainous. Flattery gets you nowhere tilde, Jessie purred. Enough talkin', Meowth snarled. Taste my fury swipes. As the feline Pokémon leapt forwards, claws primed to strike. Misty smirked. Starmie, minimize, she called, watching in satisfaction as Meowth flew over where her Starmie had previously stood, the stoic starfish Pokémon now a good foot shorter. Now, rapid spin, she added, and Starmie flew forwards, spinning rapidly as it barreled into Meowth before it could recover and sending it flying back towards the rest of Team Rocket. Zubat, go, use Supersonic, Brock commanded, and Zubat responded with a battle shriek, diving at Team Rocket's coughing and releasing a blast of high-frequency sound, sending the floating ball of gas eeling backwards as it shook its head in obvious discomfort. Wing attack, Brock continued, and Zubat dove as its supersonic attack ended, slapping coughing with its wing. Ekans, attack, Jessie snarled. Melt that flying rodent with your acid attack. Beedrill, intercept. Ash barked as Ekans coiled and sprung towards Zubat. Beedrill blurred forwards, the insect practically throwing itself into the fray as it jabbed its stinger forward and knocked Ekans out of the air. Smog attack coughing, James cried, blinking as he noticed his Pokémon rocking dizzily in the air, slowly turning in place. Coughing. It's confused. Seymour cried out. It's going to be very dangerous if you let it keep battling. A sinister smirk crossed Jessie's face. Dangerous, you say? She purred excitedly, silent. TLY pulling her Pokeball out and recalling Ekans. Coughing, sludge attack, she cried, quickly grabbing James and Meowth as she dove behind a boulder. Ash's eyes widened as the dazed coughing began spinning faster and faster in the air, its mouth filling with a toxic sludge. Get down, he cried, turning and diving for the exit with Beedrill flying out quickly behind him. Brock and Seymour rushed for the exit behind him, Brock quickly recalling his Zubat. Misty frowned. Starmie, rapid spin, she cried as her Pokémon leapt up, spinning in the air as coughing finally unleashed its sludge. As the attack landed on Starmie, the spinning starfish dispelled the viscous liquid across the walls, floors, and ceiling of the cavern, where it steamed and bubbled threateningly. Noxious fumes rose from the melting stone, driving Misty back as she recalled her Starmie, coughing violently as she joined the others in fleeing the dangerous scene. Butterfree, Pidgeotto, gust attack. Ash cried, flinging T-Wo Pokeballs forward and releasing his Pokémon, who worked in tandem to blow the approaching cloud of poisonous gas away. With the threat past, the bird and the butterfly dropped to the ground, panting from the exertion before Ash recalled them both into their Pokeballs. Thank you both, get some rest. He paused, glancing around for a moment. Everyone okay? We're all right, Brock answered, helping Seymour to his feet. Where did Team Rocket go? Misty asked, rubbing her head and wincing at the twinge of pain it sent through her. They must have used the distraction to escape, Ash muttered, turning back to the group in defeat. He froze and frowned as he looked to Misty. Brock, have you got some bandages in your bag? Already on it, Brock responded. What? Misty asked in confusion. Why, what's wrong? Careful, Misty. Seymour chimed in as he gently brought her to a flat-topped boulder to sit down. Looks like you hit your head in the confusion. You might have a concussion. Misty blinked slowly as Ash approached, kneeling down as he pulled a cloth and a bottle of water from his back, soaking the cloth and gently dabbing at her forehead. Oh, she hissed, cringing back as the cloth brushed her wound. Okay. That stings. Just be glad I don't have any rubbing alcohol, Ash joked, smiling as Misty let out a quiet chuckle. Are you feeling okay? I'm fine, the redhead said, closing her eyes as Brock wrapped her head in bandages. A little dizzy, I guess. Definitely a concussion, Seymour mused, holding up a finger as Misty opened her eyes again, gently waving it back and forth. Can you follow my movements? Misty attempted to track the finger before wincing, closing her eyes tight against the headache that came on. No, sorry. It's fine, Ash reassured her. You just take it easy. Let's try and get through the caves, we'll get you to a doctor. What about Team Rocket? Misty asked. Brock stepped up beside her as Ash shook his head. Some things are more important. The pewter trainer pointed out. Come on, let's get moving. The trio stood up, moving down the cavern path with Brock helping Misty keep her footing, before Ash paused. Looking back, he spotted Seymour standing still, waving his finger back and forth. Seymour, he called in confusion. Are you coming? Shish, the scientist hissed, slowly stepping back with his finger still wagging. Ash watched in confusion for a moment before his eyes widened as a small, pink-hued Pokémon with brown-tipped ears and a curled, fluffy tail stepped out, waving its own short finger in response to Seymour's movements. Is that a Clefairy? Misty asked quietly. Wow, Brock muttered. They're supposed to be really rare. I wonder if it was drawn out by the commotion. Seymour mused as he lowered his finger, causing the Clefairy to look at him in confusion. Did you like that? He asked, squatting and raising his finger again. The Clefairy's gaze drifted to Seymour's finger again, watching it wag back and forth before it let out a happy cry and mimicked the motion. The group watched the exchange in fascination as Clefairy's finger seemed to start glowing, building up an unknown energy before it seemed to feed back into the Pokémon's body. Clefairy blinked, its eyes glowing pink as a strange energy surrounded Seymour and he floated into the air, following the motion of Clefairy's waving finger. This must be the effect of Clefairy's metronome. Seymour cried ecstatically. The energy fed back into it and became extrasensory. How extraordinary. Are you okay, Seymour? Ash asked, stepping forward cautiously. He paused as the Clefairy's attention shifted to him, slowly lowering himself to be as close to the Pokémon's eye level as he could even as Seymour was lowered to the ground again. "Hey there," the young trainer whispered, gently offering a hand to the Clefairy. He paused as it seemed to flinch back, taking a slow breath to steady his heart before smiling kindly and trying again. "Hey now, don't be scared. We came to help. Are the lights bothering you too?" The Clefairy seemed to regard Ash for a moment before slowly approaching his outstretched hand, reaching out to place its own in his palm. After a moment it gave a small nod, glancing up at the lights around it and shielding its eyes. "Yeah," Ash chuckled. "I thought so. Don't worry, we'll do what we can to get rid of them all." Misty glanced at Brock with a knowing smirk. "Guess we're not leaving after all," she joked. "Got any aspirin in your med bag?" Brock simply shook his head with a chuckle. "Sure, Misty," he said, reaching into a side pocket of his backpack and handing her the medicine, along with a bottle of water. Having followed the Clefairy they met through the caverns, the group emerged into a large, natural cavern. The entire room was circumventing a large opening in the ceiling, allowing the bright moonlight above to shine down upon the crater in the ground. In the center of that crater, atop what looked to be a plinth made of stones and logs, stood a truly massive boulder made of smooth, dark stone. As that, Misty gasped, letting out a surprised yelp as Seymour leapt forwards in excitement. "The Moonstone," he cried. "The original Moonstone, and its impact site too. Oh, this is a discovery for the ages." "Seymour," Ash yelled, frowning at the scientist when he froze and turned back to him. "Calm down. This is Clefairy's home. Have a bit of respect." Seymour seemed to shrink in on himself as he glanced at their guide. Clefairy cowered behind Ash's leg. Sorry," he muttered, turning to look out across the cavern. "It's just, this has only been theorized until now. I can't believe I'm really looking at the original Moonstone." Brock frowned in confusion. "Hold on," he began, rubbing his chin in thought. "I thought most stone stores sold Moonstones these days. How can this be the original?" Seymour smiled as he turned to the group fully. "Ah, a very good question," he proclaimed, before launching into a detailed explanation. "You see, it was found that moonstones are in fact simply deposits of a special energy-enriched crystal that can be found in certain areas around the globe. However, it's theorized that this energy came from the energy-enriched meteorites that crashed to the Earth in the ancient past, which brought this energy from the stars above. Moonstone is simply the name that was given, as the most recent recorded impact was the one that crashed on Mount Moon on the night of a full moon, hence we refer to this as the original Moonstone. It's the first named sample. And also the reason for the mountain's name." The group stared at Seymour for a time, blinking owlishly at him as they processed the information that had been practically dumped upon them. Eventually, Ash nodded. "That actually makes a lot more sense than I was expecting," he mused. "It explains a lot too. I wonder why Clefairy brought us here, though," Misty mused. "Maybe there's something wrong up here," Brock mused, blinking as Ash held his hand up suddenly, motioning for quiet. Crouching down, the group watched as a strange-looking figure stepped out of a side passage. Dressed in a black bodysuit under a long, white, hooded coat, her face obscured by a black plague doctor's mask. A familiar trio of characters following behind, obviously struggling as EY pulled a cart full of Clefairy trapped in large cages behind them. "I can't believe you three," the mysterious figure cried, their voice clearly feminine despite the seething rage it carried. "I gave you the simplest, most out-of-the-way job I could manage, and still you managed to screw it up." "We're sorry, Madam Miasma," Jessie stammered, panting slightly as she set her side of the wagon down with James quickly following suit. "We didn't expect those twerps to show up." "Enough," the woman identified as Madam Miasma roared, spinning around and striking Jessie hard enough to send her sprawling to the ground. "Enough excuses. Enough failures. Enough of you." She paused, taking a deep breath before letting it out in a long, frustrated sigh. "Your mother would be ashamed of you." See. Lentz met that statement as James and Meowth seemed to only stare in shock, a quiet sobbing soon sounding out as Jessie's shoulders shook. Up on their vantage point, Ash found his blood boiling as anger surged through him. Sure, Team Rocket were a pain. Sure, they did some bad stuff. But they'd never given him reason to truly hate them, and something in him was screaming to help the three, let Aloe nay free the trapped Clefairy they dragged into the cavern with them. Without thinking, Ash stood up and leapt from his hiding spot, dropping into the cavern proper and landing in a crouch. "Hey!" he shouted, standing and marching determinedly towards the mysterious Madame Miasma. "I want a word with you." Miasma glanced up, and Ash could practically feel the sneer she sent his way despite the mask covering her face. "Great," she spat, glancing at the trio. "And now you've led them to me. I suppose I'll have to clean up your mess." "They didn't lead me here," Ash spat, before motioning at the caged Clefairy. "You missed one." "Ah," Miasma mused, rubbing her chin through the mask. "So one of the little pests got away and brought back a hero. I see. I suppose our benefactor wouldn't mind if I spend some time to exterminate some pests." She paused, the lenses of her mask glinting menacingly as she produced a Pokeball marked with a skull and crossbones from within her coat. Ash watched, with a hardened expression as Miasma let out her Pokemon, a snarling blue creature with large ears that stood hunched over on its short legs, flexing its short forearms menacingly. "A Nidorina," Ash mused quietly as he reached for his belt. A glance over his shoulder told him the others were making their way down into the crater, though with Misty's injury they were understandably being more cautious than he had been. "All right then, go, Butterfree." Miasma smirked beneath her mask as the butterfly Pokemon appeared from its Pokeball, fluttering in the air above her Nidorina. "Ah, one of the weaker specimens of your roster," she mused aloud, chuckling at Ash's shocked face. "Oh yes, I know all about you and your Pokemon, catch 'em. We've got you in our sights now, Tilda." Ash frowned. "So you're spying on people now too, is that it?" he asked, clenching his fists. "What else are you people doing? How many are there of you?" Miasma chuckled darkly, waggling her finger at him tauntingly. Nosy Tilda," she purred. "Come now. Is this a battle or a quiz show? Nidorina, let's start this properly, toxic." Ash watched in horror as the Nidorina spat a thick, viscous glob of purple gunk from its mouth, managing to catch his Butterfree square in the center of its chest. Butterfree staggered from the impact before wincing as the toxins began to sink into its skin. "I'd have to say," Miasma said tauntingly, "that's not a good start to the battle, Tilda." Ash grit his teeth as Butterfree shook its head, letting out a cry of determination. "Butterfree, use your sleep powder," he cried, watching as Butterfree charged forwards, scattering the light green powder from its wings even as it all seemed to divert towards Nidorina. Even as the blue Pokemon tried to dodge away, Butterfree kept circling above, scattering more and more powder that seemed to zero in on Nidorina's position as it fell. Miasma stared at the battlefield through her ever-impassive mask. An interesting strategy, she mused, seemingly to herself. And a unique way of utilizing that attack. Making use of Butterfree's latent psychic powers to direct the spores. Very clever. She paused in her praise as the lenses of her mask glinted in the low light. But not clever enough. Nidorina, escape into the earth. Miasma's Nidorina leapt back as Butterfree's spores moved closed in, flipping mid-jump before diving into the rocky ground beneath them. "Not so fast," Brock shouted, practically snarling as the rest of the group rushed up behind Ash. "Onix, chase after it," he cried, whipping Onix's Pokeball from his belt and releasing the stony titan into the air, where it directed its serpentine body to dive headfirst at Nidorina's burrow and follow it, leaving a cavernous tunnel in its wake. Quick as a flash, Miasma pulled a second Pokeball from within her coat. "Now that's hardly fair," she chided. 2 on 1. Let's even the odds a touch. Golbat. At her summons, the Pokeball split open, releasing a large, blue-hued bat Pokemon with a low-hanging jaw. "Dinner time, Golbat Tilda." Ash frowned, glancing to the side at Brock. "Can you handle the Nidorina?" he asked. "I think Butterfree might be in danger here." Brock gave him a smile, flashing a thumbs up. "Leave it to me, Ash," he said in response. "Nothing can outrun my Onix Underground." Miasma simply watched the two in silence, rolling a Pokeball in her hand as she crossed an arm across her chest. "Are you quite finished?" she asked after a moment, boredom in her voice. "You should know, I'm not normally kind enough to let you chat amongst yourselves in battle." "Shish." He paused as Butterfree dropped suddenly from above, landing on the ground and groaning in pain. "And today is no exception, Tilda." Ash's eyes widened in shock. "Butterfree," he cried, hurriedly grabbing Butterfree's Pokeball and recalling it to safety. I'm sorry, Butterfree. You did great. Tucking the ball away, Ash's gaze hardened as he pulled out another. I've had enough of you. Spearow. Miasma Wah. Tched impassively as Spearow burst from its Pokeball and flew around the cavern. Whirlwind, Golbat, she commanded casually, not even looking as the giant bat began flapping its powerful wings, blowing gusts of wind around in an attempt to knock Spearow out of the sky. Spearow, nosedive into fury attack. At Ash's command, Spearow flew a short loop before diving directly into the oncoming wind blasted at it by Golbat. With its beak pointed directly into the source of the wind currents, the small bird managed to pierce through to slam into Golbat's body before delivering a series of furious pecks and scratches, seemingly fueled by its trainer's righteous anger. With her attention diverted by the sky-bound battle, Miasma stumbled as the ground beneath her began to rumble before a great crack signaled Onix's return, pushing Nidorina out of its own tunnel and into the air before the stone serpent returned to coil around its trainer and friends protectively. Miasma frowned as Nidorina landed in a heap at her feet, her Golbat quickly retreating to flap in the air just behind her head. Interesting, she mused. You seem to be at an advantage. But not for long. As she spoke, Miasma reached into her jacket, pulling out a wickedly sharp-looking knife. With a flourish, she gripped the blade firm and drove it harshly into the giant moonstone, breaking off a shard of the black, glass-like crystal, where it dropped to the ground in front of her Nidorina. Ash stared in confusion for a moment before his eyes widened in shock. Oh no, he breathed, watching as Nidorina reached out and gripped the shard, its body slowly gaining a bright white glow. Before their eyes, Nidorina pushed itself to its feet as its body expanded, the light growing blinding to the point they had to shield their eyes before it dissipated in a burst, revealing the new form. With thick armored plating covering its body and a row of rigid spines down its back, a powerful tail swishing behind it and sharp claws ending each thick, powerful arm, the Nidoqueen struck an imposing figure as it gave a roar challenge. Not good, Brock muttered, gritting his teeth. Nidoqueen are ferociously strong. Let's do this, Ash snarled. Spearow, peck. Quote. Brock nodded before throwing his arm out. Rock throw, Onix. Miasma scoffed, chuckling darkly. You're still trying? She asked sneeringly. Golbat, Whirlwind. Nidoqueen, use your superpower. Oh no. Seymour cried from the sidelines, supporting Misty as they observed the battle. Be careful you two, Nidoqueen's superpower can level buildings. Ash grit his teeth as the whirlwind stirred up from Golbat's powerful wings pushed him back, shielding himself as the rocks and flung by Onix's rock throw were deflected to land around them. Those that weren't, were simply caught and crushed in Nidoqueen's powerful claws before the titanic Pokémon swung for the diving Spearow, narrowly missing as the avian Pokémon dodged around it to instead drive its beak into Golbat's unsuspecting face, knocking the bat Pokémon to the ground. Miasma growled in disgust as she recalled her Golbat Toit's Pokeball, only for her disgust to turn to delight as Onix dove at knee. Nidoqueen only to be caught and tossed aside with ease, crashing into the side of the cavern before landing in a heap. And then there was one Tilda, she sang teasingly. What will you do now, little Ketchum? I'm gonna take you down. Ash cried, his anger quickly boiling over as Spearow circled above him, screeching indignantly in a shared fury. You're not gonna get away with doing whatever you want to these Clefairy. How noble. Miasma chuckled condescendingly. But to no avail. Go, Nidoqueen, superpower. Ash glared as Nidoqueen charged forwards once more. Mirror move, Spearow. He roared, W. Atching as Spearow dove into his field of view from above, entire body glowing white with a surrounding red aura as it copied the properties of Nidoqueen's superpower. The two Pokémon clashed in with a shockwave of force, each trying to force the other back as they struggled to overpower each other. As the struggle continued, however, Ash watched in silent worry as Nidoqueen managed to take one step forward, followed by another, slowly pushing Spearow back due to its advantage of bulk. An admirable effort, child, Miasma taunted, slowly clapping as she moved a step closer. But not good. Keep going, Spearow. Ash cried, cutting the villainous monologue off as he willed his Pokémon on. You can do it, come on. I believe in you. Miasma stared at the boy, momentarily shocked, before barking out in laughter. Really? She cried, doubling over in laughter and utterly failing to notice her Nidoqueen's advantage failing. Believing in your Pokémon means nothing, only their raw strength can determine the victor in a fight. Then why is your Nidoqueen struggling? Ash shot back. Miasma stared, looked away, wiped the visors on her mask, and looked again. Sure enough, though it was small. 2 lines of disturbed dirt clearly showed that Nidoqueen had somehow been pushed back before getting its footing again. As she looked up, she gasped. Not only was Ash's Spearow surrounded by the crimson aura of superpower. Its entire body was glowing in a familiar, blue-white aura. Go! Ash cried, pumping his fist in confidence. Push it back, fight. Before everyone's eyes, Spearow's wings seemed to explode outwards. Nearly tripling its wingspan as the rest of its body soon followed suit. Its neck lengthened, powerful muscles visible under the coarse orange-brown feathers as the avian Pokémon's now long. Wicked-looking beak scratched against Nidoqueen's belly, its proud red plumage blinding the mammalian Pokémon as it obscured its eyes. With the added power of its enlarged wings, H's newly evolved Fearow gave a mighty flap and heaved, still utilizing the strength of its mirrored superpower to lift Nidoqueen clean off the ground and throw it back through the air with its neck. Miasma growled as her Nidoqueen landed heavily at her feet, leaping back to avoid the impact. Get up, you useless beast! She snarled, kicking her downed Nidoqueen, which groaned as it struggled to get to its feet. Stop that! Ash cried, his anger building once more at the sight. The battle's over. Your Nidoqueen's hurt. Miasma just snarled as her Nidoqueen staggered to its feet and took a shaky step forward to continue the fight. My Pokémon aren't finished until I tell them they're finished, she spat. If you're not ready to fight to the very end, you shouldn't have picked a fight with a real member of Team Rocket. Ash clenched his fist as Fearow glared openly across the cavern at Miasma, curling its wings readily. As the 2 combatants stared each other down, both sides found themselves shocked as Clefairy hopped into the middle of their fight, turning to face Miasma and her Nidoqueen. And what do you want, runt? Miasma snarled, sending her Nidoqueen stomping menacingly towards the minuscule fairy. Ash took a breath, ready to call out a command for Fearow to leap to the rescue, before noticing Clefairy's finger wagging, a strange energy building around the tip. Ash's eyes widened in realization, and he quickly recalled his Fearow, turning to sprint away along with the rest of his friends even as Miasma began laughing. Finally decided to give up. She called tauntingly, completely failing to notice Clefairy's finger as the energy began to turn a bright, violent orange. Finally decided you're out of your league, Never underestimate the might of Team Rock. Before she could finish her mocking tirade, Missima was blown back by a truly massive, powerful beam of pure energy, pinned to the back of her Nidoqueen as they slammed into Jessie, James, and Meowth, BL. Asting all 5 members of Team Rocket out of the opening in the roof of the cavern and into the distance. As the dust settled, the group all peeked out of their respective hiding places, seeing the sea. Clefairy stood panting in the center of the cavern as energy crackled all over its body. Moving towards it, Ash knelt down to pat the Pokémon on the back, giving it a smile as it looked up at him. That was amazing, he praised, idly noting as Bork and Seymour rushed past him to free the captured Clefairy. Who knew you had so much power in you, huh? Fairy, the Clefairy stammered, giving a AKY smile before being swarmed by its fellow Pokémon in a celebration of their freedom. Ash chuckled, moving back from the group even as they seemed to look up as one. Following their gaze, Ash noticed the full moon sitting high in the sky. Its light shining directly down into the cavern and causing the moonstone to glimmer with a mystical light. Ash, Misty, Brock, and Seymour took a seat at the edge of the cavern as one. The Clefairy seemed to fall into an almost ritualistic dance, moving around their moonstone shrine before a number of the Pokémon aimed their attacks at the stone itself, breaking off a number of shards. Ash blinked in awe as the shards spread around the cavern, landing on a number of the Clefairy and causing them to evolve en masse into the larger Clefable. Amazing, Seymour mused quietly, scribbling notes in a notebook he'd produced. It seems the Clefairy have some form of evolution ritual once every full moon. It seems as though they leave which members of their clan evolve up to chance, too. Ash nodded absently, only half listening as his gaze was drawn to the Clefairy that had saved the day, sighing in disappointment as it seemed to have been missed by the falling moonstone shards. He blinked suddenly as the brim of his cap was pushed down, reaching up to find a moonstone had landed atop his hat before shrugging and tucking the crystal into his backpack. With the ritual seemingly over, the Clefairy and Clefable turned happily to their saviors, beckoning them to follow before leading the group through a series of tunnels and caverns before emerging into the open. Ash smiled as he caught sight of Cerulean City in the distance, the main path not far from their current location. "Thank you," he said, bowing slightly to the Clefairy and Clefable in gratitude. "I hope you guys can be safe now." "I'll look after them," Seymour assured, smiling softly. "I'm going to stay in Mount Moon for a while. Somebody has to take all those lights down, after all. And with Team Rocket gone, it seems like it should be safe to do so now." Brock nodded. "Good luck," he said, giving the scientist a handshake. "I hope your research goes well." Seymour smiled wide, tearing up as Ash and Misty bade him similar wishes before the trio turned to make their way towards Cerulean, craving warm baths, soft beds, and perhaps a doctor. Not far down the main path, however, Ash froze. Misty and Brock soon following suit as they realized their friend wasn't with them. "What's wrong, Ash?" Misty asked curiously, wincing slightly as she rubbed her head again. "Didn't you want to get to Cerulean?" Ash nodded absently, closing his eyes as he seemed to listen for something before taking a breath. "You can come out now," he called suddenly, confusing Brock and Ms. Ty before they gasped as the still exhausted Clefairy that had come to the rescue stepped out of a bush at the edge of the road, approaching slowly. Ash turned around to face the Clefairy, smiling as he knelt down. "Let me guess," he began, holding a hand out to the Pokémon. "You wanna come with us and get stronger?" When the Clefairy stared at him for a moment before nodding in determination, Ash chuckled. "All right, that's fine by me. Welcome to the team, Clefairy." Offering a Pokeball to the fairy Pokémon, Ash watched as it slapped the ball before being absorbed into the container, which let out a victorious chime without a single shake of resistance. Ash stood up, calmly clipping the ball to his belt before turning back to his friends. "To Cerulean City then?" he asked casually, giving a wide grin that betrayed his excitement. Misty groaned as she woke up, raising her hand to shield against the bright light that burned her eyes. Slowly but surely, her vision came back to clarity, revealing the pristine white walls of what looked like a hospital room. "Wah, where am I?" the redhead asked, confusion clouding her mind as she attempted to sit up in her bed, once again groaning as her head began to spin once again. "Gah, my head, what happened?" "I can answer that one for you, sweetie," a kind voice offered, drawing Misty's attention to the pink-haired nurse as she walked in. "It's nice to see you again, Misty. Though I wish the circumstances were a little different, I must say." Misty blinked in shock. Angelica," she stammered. "But, when did I get to Cerulean City?" Angelica smiled as she picked up the clipboard at the edge of Misty's bed. "Your friends brought you in," she answered simply. "Two young men, rather handsome if I do say so, but a little young for me," she joked, winking at Misty teasingly and sending the redhead into a furious blushing fit. "Anyway, according to them, you hit your head when passing through the Mount Moon caverns and blacked out on the way here. The younger of the two, Ash, was it. He had his Fearow carry you here, came sprinting up only a few seconds later out of breath and panicking like crazy." Misty blinked dazedly for a moment before reaching up to touch her head tenderly. "I blacked out?" she asked, struggling to keep up with all the information coming so quickly. "I guess that makes sense, but I felt fine." Angelic aside as she set the clipboard down again. "Unfortunately, most people do feel fine when they suffer a concussion," she explained. "Now you seem fine for the most part, so I'm happy to discharge you after a few small tests if you want to leave, but I should warn you about a few side effects." As she spoke, Angelica sat down at the side of Misty's bed, slowly running the redhead through her tests as she spoke. "You're probably going to be sensitive to light for a while, so I'd recommend wearing some sunglasses during the day. You may also experience sudden bouts of dizziness, or drastic changes in your temper and overall mood. This is all normal, and I've explained to your friends already, but try to be aware of your mood and remember, don't take things out on them." She paused, leaning back to grab the clipboard again and making a few notes. "Some people can suddenly become dazed or dizzy after a concussion too, so be careful around any high ridges or bodies of water. Other than that, I'd say you're free to go." I'll give you some medication for the pain and you should be all clear in a day or so. Misty nodded along to the instructions, trying to take note of everything she did to look out for, and silently thanking her luck that Ash had been told of them too, in case she forgot. "Ah, thanks, Angelica," she muttered unsurely, fidgeting for a moment as the nurse made to leave before speaking up again. "Angelica, wait." Angelica paused at the door, glancing back. She asked curiously. Misty fidgeted again before taking a breath to calm herself. You didn't, by any chance?" Figuring out what the young redhead was trying to ask, Angelica smiled. "Don't worry, I haven't called anybody," she said, winking conspiratorially. "I've treated you as just another traveling trainer. So nobody but you and your friends even know you were here. Is there anything else?" She waited a beat for Misty to shake her head before chuckling. "Then by all means, you're free to go. It's been a joy, Tilda." With that last statement, Angelica left the room, leaving Misty to stew in her thoughts even as she chuckled at the nurse's pun. "I guess I should get changed, then," she mused, glancing at her bag propped up on the chair across the room. "I bet Ash and Brock are worried about me." As she stood, making sure to keep herself steady before moving too far from the bead, Sty thought back on everything that had happened. She remembered getting to Mount Moon and meeting the scientist, no, wait, that wasn't right, Seabrook. No, Seymour. That was his name, Seymour. She also remembered the lights in the caverns, and running into Team Rocket, and of course the fight that took place after. From there, her memory was splotchy, at best. She remembered a Clefairy, and following it. Then she remembered a battle. She remembered seeing Onyx knocked out, and then a lot of pretty lights, and not much after that. Wow, Angelica wasn't kidding about the memory loss. Misty muttered as she pulled her shirt on. She paused, however, she sat down to pull her sneakers on. Wait, Firo. And Ash ran after it. She blinked. Just how fast is he? A little over an hour later. Misty stepped out of the Pokémon Center's back door, sliding a pair of cheap sunglasses over her eyes as the bright sun filled her vision. There wasn't much selection in the on-site pharmacy. So she'd just grabbed a pair of gaudy, novelty plastic frames in the vague image of a Krabby, complete with large plastic claws. She sighed deeply, taking a small sip from a water bottle as she stepped out into the public battle area. Spotting Ash seemingly sparring with another trainer, a young-looking girl with long, brown hair under a white hat, wearing a red skirt and blue vest shirt. Leaf's Meowth is unable to battle. Brock called out from the sidelines of the battlefield, acting as the referee. Ash's Firo is the victor. Good job, Firo. Ash cried out, grinning wide as the large, condor-like Pokémon returned to his side. Wow, you really got a lot stronger when you evolved. I'm not out of the running yet, Ashy boy. The girl named Leaf laughed teasingly, calling her me. OWTH back to its Pokeball before spinning another on the tip of her finger. Ready for round 2. Always. Ash shot back, and Misty watched in confusion as he recalled Firo and pulled out another Pokeball. Go, Clefairy. Blinking in confusion, Misty made her way to the center's spectator benches and sat down to watch, even as the girl named Leaf spoke up again. Never took you for a fairy trainer, Ashy boy Tilda, she sang. Once more in a teasing tone. But I guess it's fitting. Go, Jigglypuff. Misty watched in a mixture of confusion and awe, both impressed that Ash had managed to capture a fairy and at his ease at commanding one so quickly, but also wondering just when he had captured it. She certainly didn't remember him catching one in the caves, but then, she was forgetting a lot from that day it seemed. The redhead blinked, snapping back to the battle at hand as Ash called for his Clefairy to use Metronome, the small pink creature wagging its fingers at Leaf's Jigglypuff before seeming to dash forwards. Delivering a number of rapid-fire punches that sent Leaf's Jigglypuff bouncing back to its trainer's feet, dazed and clearly out of the running. Hey, no fair. Leaf whined, though the grin on her face told Misty the brunette didn't mean her words. A luck of the draw bullet punch, really. Well, you always were the lucky one, Ashy boy. Ash rolled his eyes as Clefairy skipped back to his side, kneeling down to ruffle the fairy's head in appreciation. I thought I told you to stop calling me that, Leaf, he joked. And hey, I'm not lucky, I just take the risks you guys were never brave enough to try. Is that so? Leaf shouted. Well then, how's this for a risk? You're Pikachu against my last Pokemon, and I'll even tell you right now it's my Ivysaur. You down? Ash rubbed his chin in thought even as he recalled Clefairy, glancing at his partner. You up for it, bud? He asked, grinning as Pikachu simply dashed onto the battlefield. Yeah, I thought so. Bring it on, Leaf. Misty tried to keep her focus on the match, but as the two Pokemon rushed into battle each other she found her vision spinning and had to put her head in her hands for a moment to avoid the feeling of sickness that washed over her. When eventually she could look up, Leaf was recalling her Ivysaur and Ash was celebrating with Pikachu on his shoulder. She let out a sigh, slowly standing to make her way over. By the time she reached the battlefield, Ash and Leaf were shaking hands and smiling. She paused as Ash turned to her, giving a small smile and a wave before blinking in surprise as he rushed over to her. Misty! Ash cried, grabbing her hands as he tried to look her over. Are you okay? You passed out back there, we were really worried. The redhead winced slightly at Ash's volume but gave a smile nonetheless. Even as Brock rushed over to join them. I'm fine now, she said, giving them both a quick hug. Thanks for your help, guys, I didn't even realize well, you know, she chuckled. Before wincing again, are you sure you're okay, Misty? Brock asked in concern. A head injury is nothing to take lightly. If you need more time to rest. Honestly, Brock, I'm fine, Misty cut him off, giving a smile of appreciation. Nurse Joy warned me I'd get some headaches for the next couple days while my head heals properly. It's why I got these. She paused, pointing at her sunglasses with a chuckle. Ugly as they are, my eyes are going to be sensitive too. Ash nodded. Yeah, she explained all of that to us too, he muttered, before blinking as Leaf coughed awkwardly behind him. Oh, sorry. That was rude, Misty, this is Leaf, one of my best friends from back in Pallet Town. Leaf, this is my friend Misty, we're traveling together while I challenge the league. Leaf smiled and offered a hand to Misty in greeting. Nice to meet you, she offered as Misty took her hand and shook. Sorry to hear about your head, Ash filled me in, it's why I challenged him to a battle. The big mook always stewed on stuff like this unless you distracted him. Did not. Ash protested, shrinking in on himself slightly as he caught his volume. Sorry, Misty, he offered, much quieter. It's fine, Misty said with a smile as Leaf tittered to herself, causing Ash to shoot her a glare. So, what are you planning to do now? Well, Leaf said with a grin. I'm gonna go ask Nurse Joy to heal up my Pokemon. Then I'm heading for Vermilion City. Can't let the others get too far ahead, after all. You already beat the gym here. Misty asked, clearly impressed. Wow, Leaf simply shrugged. It's a water-type gym. Ivysaur handled it pretty well. Ash nodded in thought. I might struggle a little, he mused. I don't really have anything that's overly effective against water types, besides Pikachu of course. Brock chuckled as he shook his head. Didn't stop you last time, he pointed out. He took down my Geodude with a Beedrill, and followed up with Pikachu against Onix. He added at Leaf's confused look. He's the first trainer in a while to know that Onix's head spine is a very sensitive target. Ash laughed nervously as Leaf turned to him with wide eyes. What can I say? I've always been good with Pokemon trivia. Leaf blinked in surprise for a moment before her teasing smirk came back. Still can't wrap your head around math though, right? Hey, Leaf began laughing, turning and fleeing as Ash began chasing her around the field. Misty and Brock watched on passively before Brock chuckled. I keep forgetting he's just a beginner, he said. I guess, Misty muttered, seemingly lost in thought as she watched the two running around. Say, Brock, what do you know about Cerulean Gym? Brock was silent for a moment as he watched her before looking away, watching Ash. I know their win-loss ratio changed drastically recently, he answered eventually. Almost like the main driving force for their battling left. Misty nodded, remaining quiet as she thought. Brock, I won't say anything. Quote. Misty nodded. Thank you, she said, looking up and almost flinching at Brock's stern gaze. But you should. The redhead stared back at the ex-gym leader for a moment before swallowing the lump in her throat, nodding again. That evening, the group sat down for a warm meal in the Pokemon Center's cafeteria. Leaf joined them, having decided to leave for Vermilion City in the morning and regaling Brock and Misty with stories of her childhood in Pallet Town alongside Ash. And then they spent the next 3 days arguing over who got to keep the darn thing. Leaf exclaimed, inciting another round of laughter from the table at Ash's expense, even if he was chuckling along. Seriously, it must have been the rustiest looking Pokeball I'd ever seen, and they just couldn't let the darn thing go. Quote, "So what happened?" Misty asked. Ash smiled as he leaned forward on the table. "In the end, it broke in half. Gary took one half of it and I took the other." He paused, shrugging as he reached into his shirt and pulled out half of a rusted Pokeball, suspended from a chain with the edges sanded smooth. "Still have it, my mom made it into a pendant for me. It's a bit of a good luck charm." Leaf smiled. "Gary still has his, too," she revealed. "He keeps it in the glove compartment of his car, told me when I bumped into him the other day." Brock frowned slightly. "His car?" he asked. Ash sighed. "A bright red, 1965 Mustang convertible. It was his dad's, always said he'd drive it when he went on his journey." Misty frowned in confusion. "But wouldn't he be too young to drive?" Ash blinked at the two for a moment before glancing at Leaf, who just shrugged. "How old do you guys think we are?" he asked. At Brock and Misty's perplexed expressions, he let out a sigh. "Gary and I are both 16. He's got his license already. Leaf's 15, but she's super smart so she got fast-tracked to join me and Gary." "And Damien," Leaf said, nudging Ash to remind him. Ash frowned. "The less said about Damien Cross, the better," he muttered darkly, surprising Brock and Misty. Leaf sighed. "Damien was the old bully at our school," she pointed out. "He was refused a Pokemon at first. So he got one with our group instead. Though I'm not convinced he actually revised his attitude, like Professor Oak told him to." Ash rolled his eyes. "Yeah right, more lick. He pretended and faked it to get what he wanted, just like always." Brock glanced between the two for a moment before speaking. "So this, Damien, he's 17. Leaf nodded. "That's right." Brock sat back, tapping his chin in thought. "And he has blue hair. Training a Charmander." Ash frowned. "Where are you going with this, Brock?" Brock sighed. "I reported him to the authorities for Pokemon cruelty," he said simply. He was needlessly harsh to his Pokemon, beyond just a demanding trainer. He knew full well what he was doing sending his Charmander out against my Onix. Leaf sighed as Ash's fist tightened. "Yeah, that sounds like Damien all right," the girl muttered. "Anyway, enough of the gloomy stuff. Has Ash told you about Professor Oak's summer camps?" As Misty and Brock shook their heads in the negative, Ash smiled softly. "Well, he nearly missed the first one cause he broke his alarm clock." Leaf laughed. "He was lucky I went and grabbed him on my way there, though he was rushing so much he nearly went in his pajamas." "Okay, enough of that story." Ash cried desperately as the table burst into laughter. The next morning, having bid a fond farewell to Leaf as the girl set off to continue her own journey, Ash rubbed his hands together eagerly. "Cerulean Gym, here we come," he declared, turning away from the Pokemon Center and marching in the direction of the gym. Misty blinked in surprise, staring owlishly until Brock cleared his throat, giving her a pointed look. She nodded, hurrying slightly to catch up to Ash as she called out to him. Ash," she began as she came level with the hopeful trainer. I need to tell you something before." "I already know," Ash said simply, cutting her off with a calm smile. "Misty Waterflower, the fourth and youngest of Cerulean's sensational sisters. You left the gym to pursue your own path as a water Pokemon specialist." Misty started in shock at Ash even as Brock caught up to them, chuckling to himself and shaking his head. "How do you know?" Misty demanded. Ash smirked and reached over his shoulder, grabbing a magazine from his backpack. "Kanto Digest," he replied with a laugh as Misty groaned, burying her face in her hands. "Your sisters are pretty popular as swimsuit models, and in their last interview somebody asked about you. All they said was you were following your own path and they were proud." Blinking slowly, Misty found her throat tightened slightly as her cheeks felt wet. "Really?" she asked in amazement. They're proud." Ash smiled and nodded. "I think you should challenge them too," he suggested. Much to Brock and Misty's surprise. "And Brock too, actually. If you show up with a badge and challenge them for theirs, they won't think you're coming back to give up." Brock frowned slightly. "Why would they think that anyway?" he asked, and Misty nodded in agreement, also curious. Ash simply held up the magazine again before flipping to the page in question. When asked about her youngest sister Misty, Daisy the Delightful had this to say. He began, reading from the passage. Misty is our youngest sister, and we love her dearly. When she decided to leave, claiming not to return until she could surpass us all, we were very proud of her. If Misty can see this, we'd like to wish her the best of luck in her journeys, and we hope to see her again when she returns home a success. He paused, rolling up the magazine to shove it in his pocket. Now this might just be me, since I don't know them, but that sounds like a very professional way to say, Misty won't come back until she's a master water type trainer or she fails. Misty sighed and nodded. Yeah, that sounds like Daisy, she muttered. When Brock turned back to the Pokemon Center, she watched him in confusion. Are you coming then? Brock asked casually. I have a couple boulder badges on me. Misty smiled, glancing at Ash, who just smiled and shrugged. The gym can wait an hour or two, he said simply. Misty smiled proudly to herself as she polished the boulder badge she had pinned to her bag. She didn't even react as the automatic doors to the Cerulean gym slid open, allowing Ash to lead the trio of trainers in. When they approached the reception desk and found it empty, the redhead couldn't help but roll her eyes. Let me guess, Brock chuckled. Your old job. Misty just sighed. As well as janitor, aquarium keeper, finance manager, whatever actually counted as work, really. All they were really interested in was their modeling. They still take challenges though, right? Ash asked worriedly, looking around at the few walls of the lobby that weren't taken up by aquarium glass. Every surface held a poster of some kind advertising the sensational Cerulean water ballet. Misty smirked to herself. They can't not take challenges. She pointed out with a giggle. I looked into it before. If a gym leader refuses a challenge without due reason, they risk having the gym's license revoked by the league. Brock nodded along sagely. It's why I took the position when my father left, he pointed out. I'd rather do the job myself than let the gym get shut down. Makes sense, Ash muttered as he looked around, wondering how he could issue his challenge. He blinked as Misty casually stepped around the desk and took a seat. Something tells me they haven't cleaned my stuff out yet, she mused, pulling open a drawer and rummaging around. If there's no new receptionist, then they were hoping I'd come back and do it myself. Here it is. Smiling triumphantly, Misty pulled a small device out of the drawer, looking not unlike a pen with a large blue button on one end. With a press of said button, a chime rang through the gym. Pokédex, Misty said simply, holding her hand out to Ash as she logged into the computer behind the desk. Not 2 minutes later she handed the device back, having registered both Ash's challenge and her own before logging out. Well, that's the official stuff done. The battlefield is this way, my sisters should already be there. How do you know that? Ash asked as he and Brock followed the redhead down the corridors, aquarium windows on all sides broken up by posters and advertisements for more water ballet shows on support pillars. That button, Misty replied easily. It sends a signal to their bracelets that there's a challenger here. Either you get a free seat for the water ballet to watch while you wait, or they meet you on the battlefield immediately. Huh, Brock mused, rubbing his chin in thought. Useful. As they approached a set of double D Ers painted to look like crashing waves, Misty paused. Brock, could you officiate? The redhead asked. I have a feeling they haven't found a new referee either. Your job again? Brock questioned, sighing as Misty nodded in response. Sure, if that's okay with them I can do it. With that decision made, the trio stepped through the doors into what looked for all purposes to be an Olympic-sized swimming pool, complete with 3-tiered diving boards on the far side. Brightly colored pontoons floated in the water's surface, providing footholds for any non-aquatic or airborne battlers. 3 figures stood on the diving boards across the room from the trio, one to each tier. The first, on the lowest board, had long blue hair that flowed down her back like a waterfall. She wore an emerald green swimsuit that hugged her figure flatteringly without showing off what could be considered too much skin, leaving her slender legs free. Welcome to the Cerulean City Gym, she called out dramatically. The second figure, with rosy pink hair cut to mid-length so it framed her face as it fell over her shoulders and wearing a similar swimsuit in amber orange, waved her arm in a wide arc downwards, almost as if to bring attention to her wide hips. We are the sensational Cerulean sisters, she added, following after the first. The final of the three, with long, curled blonde hair, struck O's upon the highest diving board with her arms up behind her head, pushing her chest forwards and showing off her crimson swimsuit that showed a considerable amount more skin than her sister's. You have challenged our beauty and poise. And we accept. Without even glancing behind her, Misty reached back to gently push Brock's jaw back up and close his mouth. Ash crossed his arms, unimpressed, as the three figures dove from their different positions, carefully timing their jumps so that they hit the water as one. He watched with bored disinterest as they breached the water's surface and pulled themselves onto one of the pontoons, posing themselves to show off their bodies. Ash yawned. Struggling to suppress her laughter, Misty stepped forward. Violet, Lily, Daisy, she greeted her sisters in turn, giving them each a nod. At their shocked faces, she smirked. Surprised to see me back so soon, I guess. A little, the brunette spoke up. The one Ash guessed was Violet. Though we should have expected you to come crawling back, the pink-haired sister drawled. Ash decided that one was Lily. To Ash's surprise, the blonde sister stood up on the pontoon and smacked her siblings upside the head. What have I told you two about bullying her? She snapped, and as Ash noticed the hair tie of the white petal flower behind her ear, he decided that was Daisy. Welcome home, Misty. Are you staying? Misty smiled softly as she shook her head. Nope. Did you notice there were two challenges today? Blinking, the three sisters looked to the matching bracelets they wore before Daisy chuckled. I see. She mused as Violet and Lily stood up. Well then, who's going to be battling first? Ash smiled as he stepped back, gesturing dramatically. Ladies first, Tilda, he teased, winking at Misty as she glared at him. Nice boyfriend you've got there, Violet called, a purr in her voice as she gently bit her index finger. He got a name. Ash's face fell completely neutral as Misty flustered, the young man turning to Violet blankly. Ash Ketchum, we're not dating, and I'm not interested in you, he said flatly, smirking at the brunette's shocked expression. Now, Daisy called, smiling despite her sister's enraged expression. Let's save the fighting for the actual challenge. She paused, turning to look at Misty curiously. So which of us would you like to challenge, Misty? As she looked over her three elder sisters, Misty locked eyes with the one who had tormented her the most in her younger years and clenched her fist in determination. I'll battle Lily. Smirking, Lily Plack, a hand on her hip as she produced one of her Pokeballs from a leg band. You really think you've got what it takes to take me on? She asked scathingly, stepping into the middle of the pontoon as Az and Violet dove into the water and swam away, quickly climbing out of the far end of the pool. More than enough, Misty shot back, pulling her own Pokeball as she glanced to Brock, who had stepped up to the referee podium. With a nod from Daisy, he picked up the white flag beneath the podium and held it up. This Cerulean Gym challenge between leader Lily Waterflower and challenger Misty Waterflower will now begin. He called. Standard League rules apply. 2 Pokemon, a recall counts as a forfeit, first to gain 2 knockouts wins. Understood. Brock paused, waiting for the 2 trainers to nod in understanding before waving the flag. Begin. From both sides of the battlefields, a flash preceding a splash could be heard. Goldeen. Lily paused and blinked owlishly. You sent out a Goldeen too? She asked in confusion. Misty smirked. Just to prove I've trained mine better, she taunted. Grinding her teeth, Lily threw her hand forward. Goldeen, go. Quick attack. Agility. Misty ordered just as quickly. And Lily watched in surprise as Misty's Goldeen dashed out of the way of her own Pokemon's attack beneath the water. I told you I trained my Goldeen better, Tilda, Misty purred. Go, horn attack. Before she could react, Lily's Goldeen was driven out of the water and into the air above her head, an angry red mark on its underside where Misty's Pokemon had driven its horn into the unsuspecting koi fish. Now, waterfall. Lily could only blink in surprise as the water surged upwards from the pool, soaking her from head to toe as the force pushed her Goldeen into the roof of the building before letting it drop limply into the water. Almost numbly, Lily recalled her Pokemon. How's that for better training? Misty taunted, grinning widely. Lily ground her teeth in frustration as she pulled a second Pokeball out. You got lucky, she growled out. That won't happen again. Go, Cloyster. Lily launched her Pokeball into the water, where it burst open in a flash of light. Before returning to her hand automatically. Beneath the pool's surface, a dark shape began moving. "Stay sharp, Goldine," Misty called out. "Use agility again. That won't help you this time," Lily taunted, a sadistic grin on her face. Cloyster, Spike Cannon. With a surging splash, Lily's Pokémon leapt from the water into the air above the battlefield. The large, lilac-shelled oyster Pokémon held a grin on its black, pearl-like face that matched its trainer's as it unleashed a barrage of sharp spines into the water below, peppering the battlefield with projectiles. Misty watched with bated breath as the water churned angrily from the vast number of high-speed projectiles, creating a cloud of foam that obscured her vision. After a tense moment, wherein Lily's Cloyster dropped heavily to land on the pontoon with its trainer, Misty let out a gasp as her Goldine rose to the surface of the slowly calming pool, belly up and dazed beyond reason. Misty's Goldine is unable to battle, Brock called out from the sidelines, raising a white flag towards Misty as the redhead recalled her Pokémon. The match is now 1-1, next knockout wins. Misty clenched her fist in determination, quickly swapping her Pokeball for another before tossing her second Pokémon out into the battle. "Starmie, go!" With a familiar flash of light, the lavender starfish Pokémon appeared upon a vacant pontoon, letting out a defiant cry of "Hya!" as the large red gem in the center of its body flashed. "Bring it on, baby sis Tilda," Lily taunted readily, her Cloyster rolling itself back into the water ready for battle. As Misty's Starmie followed suit, the battle soon picked up pace, the waters churning and foaming until all that could be seen was the crashing waves that spilled water over the edges of the pool. "What's happening?" Ash asked quietly, leaning over to whisper to Daisy, who had placed herself in the seat next to him. Daisy smiled calmly. "Silent battle," she explained calmly, nodding to Wher. Misty and Lily were both staring intently into the waters. A test of the bond between trainer and Pokémon, neither of them will say anything until the victor emerges. "Interesting," Ash muttered as he sat forward, watching the pool intently. To the eyes of everyone else in the room, the only sign of battle was the churning pool waters and the trainers stood at either end. To Ash, however, if he really focused, he felt he could just make out the shapes of the Pokémon under the surface, hearing their voices as they clashed beneath the obscuring layer of water foam they created. Ash watched intently as, known only to him, Starmie deflected another spike cannon barrage with its own rapid spin, propelling itself forward into Cloyster's shell and knocking it away to crash into the edge of the pool. Silence fell as the waters settled within the pool, both trainers watching with bated breath. Those in the stands sat on the edge of their seats to see the results. Brock knelt down on his podium, trying to get a better view of the Pokémon in the pool, only to leap back as Cloyster flew out of the water, landing heavily on Lily's pontoon. "Ha!" the pink-haired sister proclaimed, hands on her hips in triumph. "Take that, Misty." Misty simply stared at her sister as Starmie leapt from the water to land next to her, clearly tired but nonetheless standing. Cloyster, however, hadn't moved yet. "Wait," Lily muttered, kneeling down to roll her Pokémon over and gasping at its dazed expression. "No." Brock held up a green flag in Misty's direction. "Lily's Cloyster is unable to battle," he declared as the pink-haired gym leader dejectedly recalled her Pokémon. "Challenger Misty is the winner." Misty was silent for a moment, clearly shocked despite her display of confidence prior. As snapped out of her thoughts as Ash rushed out of the stands, sweeping her off her feet to swing her around in victory. "You did it, Misty," he cried out, grinning ear to ear, something Misty quickly found herself mirroring. I did it," Misty muttered, before quickly being overrun by giddy giggles. "I did it. I won." Ash and Misty continued their impromptu celebration, laughing as Ash spun her around in joy, before coming to a stop as Misty's eldest sister interrupted them with a good-natured smile. "Excellent work, Misty," Daisy praised, clapping her hands twice. The sound of a door opening came from the pool before a number of water Pokémon appeared from the waters, each one cheering in their own way. "Everyone's so proud of you." Ash set Misty down as the redhead's eyes grew wet with tears. "Ah, thank you everyone," she said in a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. "I didn't realize you were all watching." "Of course they were," Violet chuckled. "They've missed you as much as we have, Misty." She paused, elbowing Lily as she stepped up to the group. "Right, sis." Lily just rolled her eyes. PFF'd, whatever, she muttered before flashing Misty a grin. You got lucky. Ms. Tai wiped her eyes clear before smirking at her sister. Really? Care to go again and we'll test that? Before the two could get any further, Daisy stepped between them. There'll be time enough for that another day, she said calmly. For now, I believe you owe your sister something, Lily. A punch in the mouth. Lily offered hopefully, wilting slightly under Daisy's disapproving glare. Fine, fine, I was just joking anyway, seal. A moment after Lily barked its name, a small, white-colored seal Pokémon poked its head out of the water. Seeing Misty, it gave a big, goofy-looking smile and stuck its tongue out, revealing a small black cushion with a badge in the shape of a blue water droplet pinned to it. Misty smiled as she knelt down, reaching to pet Seal's head before taking her badge. Thank you, she said gratefully, letting the Pokémon sink back into the water before turning to her sisters. And thank you too, Lily. That was a great battle. Yeah, Lily sighed, rolling her eyes before a grin split her face again. It wasn't bad. You're getting good, Squirt. Says the short one, Misty teased, laughing as she turned and ran from Lily trying to chase her down. Daisy head them both with a smile on her face before turning to Ash. I believe it's your turn, young man. Ash grinned as Pikachu leapt onto his shoulder, ready and raring to go. Ash, nice to meet you properly, he said, holding his hand out. Daisy took the hand and shook it firmly. Mind if I take you on myself? She asked courteously. I want to see something for myself. I wouldn't have it any other way. Before long, the energy in the gym had calmed enough that Misty and Lily were no longer racing around the battlefield. Instead, the two sisters had taken seats in the viewing stands alongside Brock, the referee position having been filled instead by Violet. Ash shrugged out of his overshirt, placing it aside along with his bag and cap. He took a moment, seemingly thinking for a moment or nodding to himself as he stepped up to the challenger podium. Ready, Daisy called, having swam her way back to the opposite side of the pool. Now stood on the opposing podium, she held a Pokeball up readily. Ready, Ash shot back, grinning as Pikachu let out a challenging cry. Both turned to Violet as she raised two white flags. The Cerulean Gym challenge between leader Daisy and challenger Ash will now begin. She announced. You know the rules. 2 Pokémon each, withdrawing your Pokémon counts as a forfeit. The Bluenet looked from Ash to Daisy, each one nodding to her in understanding before she dropped the flags. Begin. Daisy moved first, flicking her Pokeball forward and releasing her first Pokémon, a large, orange and black fish with flowing white fins and tail, a sturdy-looking horn atop its head. Ash blinked in surprise. That's not a Goldeen, he said, though a smirk slowly began to grow on his face. Guess I should have expected more of a challenge from you, huh? You know, I'm not sure whether I should feel complimented or insulted, the blonde gym leader chuckled. Now, don't keep a lady waiting, young man. My Seeking has been dying for a good battle for a long time. Ash smirked. What do you mean? He teased. My Pokemon's already on the field. Right, Pikachu. Pika. With a cry of determination, Pikachu leapt onto the nearest pontoon, sparks flying from its cheeks readily. Both Pokémon watched each other warily, seeming to evaluate the challenge before them. Go, Pikachu! Ash cried, sweeping his arm out. Use Thundershock. On command, Pikachu leapt into action, darting around the pool and leaping from pontoon to get a better angle on Daisy's Seeking before letting out a cry of effort. Leaping up, the electric rodent curled in on itself slightly, before releasing a blinding bolt of electricity that arced towards Seeking. Ash watched with a smirk on his face, quite certain of an early victory, before blinking in surprise. The electric attack hit Seeking's horn and left seemingly no effect on the Pokémon at all. Wait, what? The young trainer asked in shock. How? Daisy simply gave a coy smile. Did you truly think I had no counters to a pesky electric attack like that? She asked teasingly, before gesturing to the battlefield. That's why Seeking is always my lead. People always seem to forget about its lightning rod ability. Brock sat back in somewhat stunned silence as Misty and Lily snickered between themselves, all of them watching Ash slap a palm to his forehead. Did you know about this? The pewter trainer asked, looking between the two sisters curiously. Of course we did, Lily replied with a smirk, crossing her arms as she sat back smugly. It's pretty common for people to grab an electric type to challenge us. Thinking it'll be an easy win. It was kind of funny, Misty continued, still giggling to herself. There was this big buff guy once, and he thought he could just sweep through here with his Electabuzz. His face when Seeking shrugged off a Thunderpunch was priceless. Ooh, I remember that. Lily laughed. Didn't that guy vow to show us how a real gym was run, and run off crying? Brock simply shook his head in wonder, leaving the two to their new conversation as he turned to watch the match. He winced as soon as he was looking again, he saw Pikachu sent flying by a powerful horn attack from below. Pikachu, are you okay? Ash called from his side of the arena, crouching down as his Pokémon landed and skidded back on its feet. Pikachu simply shook itself off, uttering the water clinging to its fur before leaping back into the fray. That's the spirit, buddy. Now, use double team. If we can't fry this fish, we're gonna leave it confused instead. As he spoke, Pikachu leapt from its pontoon, seemingly splitting into multiple copies of itself as each one landed on a different platform and continued moving, leaving more copies behind as they moved until the battlefield was filled with identical Pikachu clones. Seeking swam in circles under the surface, clearly confused as to where the true Pikachu had gone. An interesting strategy, Daisy mused, tapping her chin in thought. But it won't do you much good. Megahorn, Seeking. Pikachu, quick attack. Leaping from the water, Seeking began throwing itself at any of the Pikachus it could reach, its horn glowing with power as it crashed through its target. The Pikachu that was struck faded into nothing as Seeking slid across the pontoon and into the water again, but not before Pikachu managed to zip out of the formation of its clones and strike it with a high-speed body check before disappearing into the clones again. The two combatants continued this way for some time, with Seeking continually leaping from the pool to attack Pikachu only to strike a clone and receive a body check in return before it could retreat to the safety of the water. When Daisy called for a water pulse to catch Pikachu off guard, Ash instead called for Light Screen, giving away Pikachu's position but reducing the damage his Pokémon took in the process. There it is, Daisy said with a smirk. Quick Seeking, use agility and strike with a horn attack. Quote, quick as a flash, Seeking darted at Pikachu, leaping from the water once more and driving its horn into the electric rodent's side. With a cry of pain, Pikachu slid back, panting slightly as Seeking slipped back into the water. Ash smirked when the fish Pokémon flinched, its movements turning sluggish. You may be able to negate electric attacks, Ash taunted. But Pikachu can cover its whole body in electricity. Misty blinked in surprise before turning to Brock. What does that mean? She asked in confusion. Brock glanced at her for a moment, raising his brow, before answering. A lot of electric Pokémon have the ability to coat their bodies with a low level of electricity, he explained. Pikachu is one of them. We call this ability static, WH. When another Pokémon makes contact with the Pokémon, that electricity can give them a mostly harmless shock, but it leaves them somewhat paralyzed as the muscles spasm from the shock. As Misty turned back to watch the battle, seemingly amazed, Lily rolled her eyes. Did you seriously not know that? She asked scathingly. Geez, you're so dumb sometimes. I don't exactly read up on electric Pokémon, Misty shot back angrily. As the sisters began to squabble again, Ash cracked his knuckles readily. Now Pikachu, he cried. Finish this off, use double kick. Dodge it Seeking. Daisy's command fell on near deaf ears as Seeking's body seized, the paralysis locking it in place as Pikachu leapt and spun in the air, delivering a powerful 1-2 strike with its hind legs before using the second strike to spring back onto its pontoon. Panting heavily, Seeking rolled in the water for a moment before floating to the surface, eyes dazed and belly up. Seeking is unable to battle. Violet called from the referee's podium, holding up a red flag towards Daisy. This match goes to challenger Ash. Daisy sighed, but smiled nonetheless as she recalled her Seeking to its Pokeball. Good job, Seeking, she praised, pressing a light kiss to the sphere before swapping it for her second. Ash blinked in surprise at the two-tone blue dive ball she held up. Now then, shall we begin this second round? Ash glanced at his partner before flashing Daisy a grin. Bring it. Nodding, Daisy struck an elegant pose as she tossed her second Pokeball into the ring, a flash of white light releasing a large shape into the waters. Hidden from view, the shape began swimming laps rapidly, seemingly warming itself up before it leapt onto an empty pontoon and posed readily. Ash stared in awe at the large, blue-skinned, frog-like creature before him, its torso taken up by a large white stomach with a spiraling black pattern in the center. Two bulbous eyes glared at Pikachu in challenge as the Poliwrath flexed readily before slamming a large white fist into an open palm. "I hope you're ready for a true battle," Daisy taunted, smiling confidently. "Poliwrath here simply loves a good fight, so he should prove a difficult challenge for you." Again Ash glanced at Pikachu, seeing his near-exhausted partner panting as it stood unsteadily on its own pontoon. After a thought, Ash nodded to himself. "Pikachu, come back," he said calmly. Simply nodding at Pikachu's shocked look. "Do you forfeit your Pikachu in this match?" Violet asked, holding a red flag in her hand closest to Ash. At his nod, she held it up. Challenger Ash has forfeited the match of Pikachu vs Poliwrath. This gym challenge is now 1-1, next knockout wins. "A good move," Brock muttered in the stands as Ash seemed to think his moves out carefully. Pikachu was on its last legs. As much as it had the type advantage in that match-up, it would have been cruel to allow it to continue. But now Ash only has one Pokémon against Daisy's strongest. Misty said worriedly. "I wonder who he's going to pick." "Worried about your boyfriend there, Misty?" Lily teased. "He's not my boyfriend." Pushing the newest round of bickering from his mind, Ash considered his options carefully. He knew Poliwrath was a water and fighting type, so any one of his remaining Pokémon had a good chance at getting him the win. Who would he choose? However, nodding resolutely to himself, Ash pulled a Pokeball from his belt. "Made your decision?" Daisy called as her Poliwrath stretched its powerful arms in preparation. "I have," Ash declared. Tossing his Pokeball high into the air, Ash released his Fearow, the powerful avian Pokémon spreading its wings wide and flying a lap in the air around the pool before hovering above its trainer. "I choose Fearow." Violet nodded from her position. The match between leader Daisy's Poliwrath and challenger Ash's Fearow will now begin. Without waiting, Ash thrust his hand out. "Fearow, go," he cried. "Use your Fury attack." Diving with surprising speed, Fearow struck Poliwrath in the stomach beak first before continuing with a flurry of continuous strikes, pecking and scratching at the amphibian Pokémon with surprising ferocity. Daisy winced at the series of blows her Pokémon took before responding in kind. "Knock it away with a double slap, Poliwrath," she ordered, and Poliwrath complied, delivering a series of powerful slaps for every scratch it took before Fearow let out a squawk of indignation and flapped back, circling overhead and out of reach. "Your Poliwrath may be good at hand-to-hand combat, Daisy," Ash called out. "But you can't win a fight if you can't hit your enemy. Now Fearow, use focus energy." As Fearow began its mental focusing exercise, Daisy smirked. "Did you think you were the only one to try that?" she asked teasingly. Before Ash could answer, she thrust her hand out. "Poliwrath, leap up, and use submission." Crouching quickly, Poliwrath leapt into the air, surprising Fearow as it grabbed the large bird and turned to pile drive it into a pontoon. While Poliwrath winced as it backed up, rubbing its shoulder tenderly, Fearow had clearly taken most of the BL. Ow as it scrambled to its feet and glared at its opponent. "Fearow won't go down that easily. Go, use your peck attack." With surprising speed, Fearow blasted itself off of the pontoon and dove straight for Poliwrath, pecking it between the eyes furiously and backing off before it or Daisy had a chance to react. By the time Poliwrath had brought its arms up to defend, Fearow was already in the air again, circling and readying for another attack. The battle continued in this way for a while, with Fearow narrowly avoiding Poliwrath's attacks often by nothing more than a feather tip as the amphibie. And Pokémon pressed the offensive with leaping physical attacks and sharp-shot bubble beams. In return, Poliwrath proved just as nimble as it was powerful, ducking and weaving around Fearow's attempts to dive bomb it and narrowly avoiding each peck and scratch that was delivered its way. Eventually, both Pokémon stood on opposing pontoons, glaring angrily at each other as they panted heavily. Likewise, their trainers stared each other down, a fire in their eyes evident as the atmosphere of the battle had shifted from friendly bout to a determined head-to-head clash. It's all or nothing now, Fearow. Ash cried, pointing dramatically. Peck attack. Go, Poliwrath. Daisy ordered simultaneously. Use submission. As both Pokémon charged, Fearow flying fast and low as Poliwrath leapt from pontoon to pontoon. The air seemed to thicken as all those watching held their breath. The Pokémon clashed in the center of the pool, the force of their power causing the water to erupt in a truly massive splash around them and obscuring both from view for a few precious moments that left the question hanging in the air. Who would win? As the water came crashing back down, sending the pool rocking with waves. All eyes fell on the two Pokémon on the central pontoon. Fist met feathered face, beak met mucus-covered forehead, and both Pokémon glared at the other, daring the other to back down. Everyone gasped as, finally, one of the Pokémon fell. Poliwrath lost its footing, slowly falling backwards before splashing into the water, defeated. Fearow panted heavily, shaking its head to dispel the dizziness of Poliwrath's blow to its head before moving to help its opponent out of the water and lay Poliwrath out on its back on the pontoon, where Fearow promptly flopped over to rest as well. Blinking away her shock, Violet raised a flag in Ash's direction. Poliwrath is unable to battle, she declared. Fearow has won this battle. The victor is challenger Ash. Daisy watched from her position as Ash began cheering, leaping onto the pontoons in the pool before sliding onto his knees and hugging his Fearow happily. Smiling calmly, the gym leader made her way onto the field, the pool closing slowly as a cover extended from the edges for her to walk on, leaving only a circle in the center where the pontoons gathered. That was very impressive, Daisy said, kneeling down as she reached out to gently stroke Poliwrath's arm. The amphibian stirred at her touch, groaning as it looked up at her before lying back to rest. You earned your victory today, Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town. You should be proud. Ash smiled up at her, supporting his Fearow as it rose to its feet and shook water from its feathers. It's my Pokémon that should be proud, he countered, smiling. They put in all the work. Daisy smiled warmly. You're a good trainer, Ash, she said, glancing behind her as the others approached. As they did, Seal popped out of the water, a goofy grin on its face as it stuck its tongue out and provided a shining cascade badge. Take it, you earned it. Grinning, Ash gently took the badge from Seal's mouth, watching as the Pokémon retreated into the water again. Turning, he grinned as his Pokémon, seeing the proud looks in Pikachu's and Fearow's eyes at their victory. We did it, guys, Ash said, his voice barely above a whisper as the reality settled in on him once more. Slowly, his grin spread, and his voice grew in volume as he continued. We did it. We won the Cascade Badge. Pikachu and Fearow let out cries of victory as Ash began laughing, before stumbling. Ash winced, pulling out Fearow's Pokeball as he scooped Pikachu into his arms. Sorry guys, he apologized, chuckling. Let's get you both back to the Pokémon Center as soon as we can, You both deserve a good, long rest now. With that, he held the Pokeball out, recalling Fearow into the capsule to rest. As he stood, his friends joining and congratulating him as Misty's sisters helped Poliwrath to his feet. The Pokémon far too proud to retreat into a Pokeball after its loss, the good vibes seemed to amplify between them all. 2 victories in one day seemed an infectious mood booster for Ash and Misty both. And Brock couldn't help but smile proudly for his friends despite the loss he'd suffered from both in the past. Following a quick round trip to the Pokémon Center, the group decided to join Misty and her sisters at their home for a lavish dinner before moving on the next morning. On the southbound path from Cerulean City, Ash couldn't help but grin widely as yet another battle ended. And that's 10, he cried, watching his Pidgeotto fly a victory lap before recalling it. Wow, mister. The young trainer he had just finished battling said in awe, eyes practically shining as he stared at Ash. You're really strong. Ash smiled gratefully, rubbing the back of his head as he let out an embarrassed chuckle. I guess so, he agreed before shaking his head. But I'm no special. Keep it, and I'm sure you'll be just as good soon enough. Really? The boy cried, quickly recalling his Rattata before turning and sprinting off. I'm gonna go heal and start training. Chuckling, as H watched the boy go before turning back to his friends. Brock and Misty smiled at him, and the group turned to continue on their way. That was pretty mature of you, Ash, Brock complimented. I'm Sue. A lot of trainers start to get big-headed after their second badge. Oh, you have no idea, Misty groaned with a roll of her eyes. I couldn't tell you how many trainers start bragging as soon as they win at my sister's gym. None of them could even beat Daisy, I guarantee it. Ash simply shrugged. Well, I won't say I don't think I'm good, he said, rubbing the back of his head as he led the way down the path. But there's always somebody out there better than you, you know. Even the top trainers in the world compete against each other to test themselves. Can't argue that logic, Brock mused as Misty nodded. He paused, squinting slightly as he looked into the distance. Wait, what's that? Ash blinked as he raised his hand to shield his eyes from the sun. Looks like a fence, he mumbled. Is there a farm or something around here? Misty shook her head. No, I think that's AJ's place, she offered. At Ash and Brock's confused looks, she shrugged. He was a kid that rolled through Cerulean not long before I struck out. He challenged the gym, lost to Violet, and said he'd try the gym challenge again after he got 100 wins in a row. Rumors started about a wild trainer who built his own gym out here. Ash looked up as the group approached the fence, seeing the large wooden sign above what looked to be the entrance gate declaring that this was, in fact, AJ's gym. A counter. Beneath the sign declared the number of wins this AJ character had earned, the number sitting comfortably at 98. He's pretty close, then, Ash mused, before grinning. Anyone else kinda wanna see what this guy's made of? Chuckling. Brock shook his head. I'm good, he said passively. But you go ahead if you want to. Glancing to Misty and seeing her equally excited grin, Ash stepped forward and raised his hand, banging against the gate loudly. What are you doing, to my gym? Blinking, Ash turned to the new voice, spotting a green-haired young trainer in a black shirt printed with flame patterns and a pair of cargo shorts. A backpack hung loosely in his hand, and a sandshrew walked at his side. You must be AJ, Ash said with a smile, holding his hand out. We saw your gym as we were passing by. And we'd like to challenge you if that's okay. Raising a brow, AJ looked Ash up and down before glancing to Brock and Misty. All three of ya? He asked curiously, nodding as Brock shook his head and pointed to Ash and Misty. Just them, the pewter trainer said. I'm just here as support. AJ shrugged. Fair enough, he said simply, turning to head into the gym, the gate opening of its own accord as he approached. Come on then, I gotta drop off these new Pokemon and then we'll fight. Nodding, the group followed AJ into his gym, marveling at what he'd managed to build for himself in what they could only assume was a relatively short amount of time. Aside from what appeared to be his home, a small, simple wooden shack, there was a large, circus-like tent towards the back of the area, with a large, raised platform serving as a battlefield in the center. This is pretty cool. Ash marveled, looking around in awe. How did you build all this? Well, I didn't sit back and wish for it, that's for sure. AJ laughed, ducking into the large tent in the back. After a moment's pause, the trio followed him inside, looking around in awe. Within the tent, AJ had seemingly set up not just a Pokemon battling gym, but a training gym, complete with weights, exercising equipment, and a swimming pool. Ash couldn't help but marvel at the Pokemon within the tent as they trained, each one wearing a strange brace that seemed to make it tougher for them to move. Impressive, ain't they? AJ asked as he approached the group once more. Seems a little rough, Ash mused thoughtfully, looking around. What's with the braces? Quote, what, my macho braces? AJ smirked, crossing his arms smugly. Designed them myself. Makes him work harder, doubles the gains from trainin'. Course I don't anything of my Pokemon that I wouldn't do myself. Rolling his sleeve up, AJ showed the edge of one of his braces fastened around his own body, flexing slightly to show how it moved with him. Interesting, Brock mused, kneeling down to inspect a curious Rattata as it approached. These Pokemon seem very healthy. What kind of food do you give them? Again AJ smirked, rolling his sleeve down before rebuffing his knuckles against his shirt. My own recipe. A secret, o' course. Brock nodded in understanding, before a sharp gasp had the group spinning around in alarm. Their eyes fell on Misty, DS over her mouth in horror as she stared at the pool, where AJ's Sandshrew leapt out and shook itself off before moving to climb the diving board once again. What are you making your Sandshrew do? The redhead demanded angrily. Rounding on AJ, the younger trainer held his hands up defensively, raising a brow. Not that it's any of your business, he shot back. But Sandshrew is training his defenses. He's weak to water, so he's building up a resistance with dive training. Ash watched in a mixture of worry and curiosity as Sandshrew continually clambered up the diving board, stretching for a moment before diving into the pool below, making a splash in its ball form. Every time, it remained beneath the surface for roughly 5 seconds before leaping out again, spinning rapidly to shake T. He water off and catching its breath before repeating the process over again. Ash had to admit, despite the discomfort the training clearly put Sandshrew in, the Pokémon didn't seem to be in pain, and as he watched the time it spent under the water increased even if just by a fraction. How long has Sandshrew been doing this? He asked suddenly, cutting Misty off as she prepared to launch into a tirade of reprimands for AJ. AJ thought for a moment before answering. Well, we got the pool set up first, so, a few weeks, taking every other day to rest. He offered. Used to be, it leapt out of the water straight away. Nowadays he can stay under for about 10 seconds at a stretch before he has to get out. Don't tell me you're considering that for your Pokémon, Ash. Misty demanded crossly. No, Ash shot back immediately. Shaking his head. As much as I can see that there are benefits to this training, I don't think it'd be right for me or my team. AJ shrugged. Don't matter none to me, he drawled. Turning and walking away as a clock chimed in the distance, his Pokémon stopping to listen before dispersing to rest. This stuff ain't for everyone, but it's right for us. Misty let out a sigh, massaging her temples quietly before shaking her head. Well, I guess your Pokémon would have left if they didn't like it, she mused. So this is their break time. AJ nodded. No point in Orkin, out if you're just gonna collapse after, he explained simply. Regular rest breaks to cool down and hydrate, then back to work. 3 square meals a day. That's how we roll around here. Sensible, Brock agreed, nodding. But I think there was something else we wanted to do while we were here. Right, Ash said with a nod. We were wondering if you'd battle us while we're here. It could be some good training before we hit Vermilion City. AJ raised his brow at Ash curiously. You headin' for the gym there? He asked, waiting for Ash to nod in response before continuing. What badges you got so far? Boulder and Cascade. Ash replied readily, before motioning to Misty. Same for my friend. What about you? I got nothing yet, AJ said with a shrug. I ain't competent until I get 100 wins in a row. Well, let's get started then. Making their way outside, AJ led Ash and Misty towards his battle arena as Brock took up a position to one side, ready to watch. After a brief conversation, Misty joined Brock. Arms crossed over her chest as she frowned at AJ. Why so upset? Brock asked curiously as they watched Ash step up to the field. I just don't all that so-called training he's doing in there. Misty sighed. It seems cruel. Brock shrugged. Some would say it is, he allowed. But different trainers find different training methods that work for them. It's not our place to question them as long as the Pokémon are happy and healthy, which AJ's Pokémon seem to be. Misty sighed again. I guess. They both looked up, ceasing their conversation as Ash and AJ stepped up to the battlefield, seemingly ready to begin their battle. So what are the rules of your gym? Ash called out, rolling a Pokeball between his fingers. AJ shrugged. How about a standard challenge? He shot back. 2-on-2. Sound good to you? Ash simply nodded before tossing his Pokeball out. Sounds great, he answered as Clefairy appeared in a flash of light. Let's go, Clefairy. AJ blinked in surprise before smirking. Full of surprises there, ain't ya? He asked, chuckling. Alright then, go. Sandshrew. Ash watched as AJ's Sandshrew leapt onto the field from the sidelines, stretching for a moment before glaring readily at his Clefairy. Clefairy watched the pangolin-like Pokémons show in seeming interest, before letting out a yawn. Sandshrew bristled at the display. Seems like Clefairy is taunting Sandshrew. Brock observed curiously. Might not be a good idea, but we'll have to see. AJ clenched his fist at Clefairy's display. Can't you teach your Pokémon a little respect? He demanded of Ash before shaking his head to clear it. Never mind that. Sandshrew, use dig. Ash watched as Sandshrew leapt into the air before diving into the compacted earth of the battlefield as though it were water, leaving a pit in the earth behind. Minimize, Clefairy. he called, smiling as his Pokémon focused its energy inwards before seeming to shrink significantly, suddenly standing at half its original size. His smile faded when Sandshrew leapt from the earth directly beneath Clefairy's feet, delivering a body check that sent Clefairy flying back. "It'll take more than just your cheap tricks to beat Sandshrew," AJ taunted. "Now go Sandshrew, use Poison Jab." Before Ash could react further, Sandshrew leapt forward, its claws becoming surrounded with a sickening aura as it jabbed forwards, striking Clefairy in the chest and sending it flying back to land at Ash's feet, unconscious. Ash blinked in surprise before kneeling down and scooping Clefairy into his arms, cradling it gently. "Good work," he praised gently, pulling Clefairy's Pokeball out and recalling it into the capsule. He then looked up at AJ, a fierceness burning in his eyes. "Impressive." AJ shrugged. "We didn't win 98 matches in a row by being pushovers, you know." Nodding, Ash stood up, clipping Clefairy's Pokeball to his belt and grabbing another. "Fair enough," he allowed before holding the new capsule up. "But let's see how you deal with this one. Butterfree, go." Once again, Ash's Pokémon appeared on the battlefield in a burst of light. Butterfree shook itself awake as it emerged before fluttering into the eye, staring down at AJ's Sandshrew passively. "No wasting time then," AJ called with a smirk. "Sandshrew, Poison Jab." Sandshrew curled in on itself for a moment before using its tail to launch itself into the air, rocketing towards Butterfree with impressive speed as that same aura surrounded its claws. Butterfree seemed to watch it for a moment before reacting, dodging to one side and letting the pangolin Pokémon soar past into the air. "Good job, Butterfree," Ash called, pausing when AJ smirked. "What? This?" AJ shot back, pointing into the sky at Sandshrew. "Roll out." Ash looked up in shock, just in time to see Sandshrew curl into a ball again and start spinning rapidly in the air, slowly building speed as it rushed back down towards Butterfree. "Look out, Butterfree," he cried out in worry, only to watch as Sandshrew slammed heavily into Butterfree's back, driving both Pokémon down to the earth with an impact that kicked up a cloud of dust. Sandshrew leapt out of the cloud and let out a cry of victory, and Ash sank to his knees slowly as the dust cleared and he saw Butterfree lay prone on the battlefield, struggling to lift itself into the air again. Letting out a sigh, he recalled his Pokémon before standing and walking towards AJ. The green-haired trainer raised a brow as Ash approached, subtly shifting his stance. When Ash stopped in front of him, however, he was shocked as the pallid trainer extended a hand and smiled. "Good match," Ash offered, shaking AJ's hand when he took his. "You really are that good. The gyms have their work cut out for them when you challenge them." Quote. AJ stared for a moment before grinning, squeezing Ash's hand tight. "You know it," he said happily. "Come on, let's get your Pokémon healed up." Nodding, Ash turned to follow AJ, pausing suddenly as something caught his attention. Turning back to the entrance of AJ's gym, he blinked as he saw a large, red-colored, rubber ball, roughly half his height and size. "Was that always there?" he asked suddenly, catching AJ's attention. The green-haired trainer turned, following Ash's gaze to stare at the ball curiously. "It ain't Onea mine," he offered in confusion. "Wonder where it came from." Ash frowned suspiciously, slowly pulling a Pokeball from his belt. "Pikachu, come here," he ordered calmly, watching as his partner rushed over to clamber up onto his shoulder. "You can come out now." AJ looked to Ash, clearly confused, before his eyes widened in shock as the ball seemed to tremble before 4 feet burst from the bottom. The surface of the sphere seemed to split from there before falling to both sides, revealing a pair of trainers he didn't recognize and a Meowth clinging to their arms. "This damn twerp." Jessie spat angrily, fists clenched at her sides. "How did you know we were there?" "Never mind that, Jess," James interrupted before Ash could answer. "All of you, hand over the Pokémon now before anyone gets hurt." AJ blinked in confusion, looking to Ash for an explanation and jumping slightly when he saw Misty and Brock had joined them without him noticing. Ash noticed him looking and sighed. "Team Rocket," he said simply. "Cree. Meows who keep trying to steal people's Pokémon wherever they go. They're not very good at it though," Brock pointed out. "At least, not from what I've seen." Jessie growled angrily, releasing her Ekans. "Ekans, shut those twerps up now." Quote. AJ's eyes widened as the snake Pokémon lunged forwards, acting instinctively as he thrust his hand forward. Sandshrew, defense curl. On his command, AJ's Sandshrew leapt into Ekans' path, curling in on itself until its body resembled an almost perfect sphere of sandstone. When Ekans' attack landed on Sandshrew's hide, the serpent recoiled, rubbing its jaw with its tail tenderly. Coughing, go! James called, releasing his own Pokémon as the purple orb floated forward. Poison gas. AJ stepped forward, a glare crossing his features. Dig, Sandshrew, he commanded, watching as his Pokémon dove into the earth. As the toxic cloud dissipated and Team Rocket's Pokémon looked around in confusion, he smirked. Now, emerge into rollout. Bursting from the ground, Sandshrew flipped over, striking Ekans on the head with its tail before using that to spring forward into a rollout attack that impacted with coughing and sent it reeling back. Using the momentum of the attack, the pangolin Pokémon circled around to do the same to Ekans, leaving both Pokémon panting at Team Rocket's feet. Wow, they really are pathetic, AJ murmured, shaking his head. Whatever. Sandshrew. Send these clowns packing with a final rollout. As Sandshrew began speeding towards Team Rocket, a cloud of dust forming behind it, James gulped. Jesse merely sighed. 3, 2, 1. What are you doing? Meowth asked, crying out as Sandshrew's attack impacted and sent the trio flying back from the force, easily clearing the treeline as they disappeared from view. AJ turned back to Ash, Misty, and Brock, blinking as he saw them all staring at him. What? He asked. Nothing, Ash muttered before smirking. You said something about healing my Pokémon. AJ smiled before motioning towards the tent. Follow me. Just over an hour later, Ash, Misty, and Brock stood outside of AJ's unofficial gym. The green-haired wild trainer stood across from them with a backpack on his shoulder and Sandshrew at his side. You could come with us, you know, Ash offered. Could be interesting. Nah, AJ responded casually, motioning with a thumb over his shoulder. I gotta head back towards Pewter and Cerulean anyway. I do wanna see you at the league again though. Bet on it, Ash laughed, holding his fist out to AJ and receiving a fist bump in return. Better be as much of a challenge then as you were today. You know it. With that, AJ turned and made his way towards Cerulean, waving over his shoulder for a moment at the group. Ash smiled, glancing up at the sign above the gym, which now showed 101 wins, 0 losses, and a large, closed, sign. Looks like you've got yourself another rival now, Ash, Brock joked, chuckling as the trio turned to continue their own journey. I'm still not sure about his training methods, Misty muttered, speaking up as she turned to Ash. What did he give you, anyway? Ash blinked, holding up the package that AJ had handed him within the tent before they went their separate ways. What, this? He asked, shrugging. Dunno. He just said Clefairy seemed like it liked to battle, and this might help it get stronger. Curiously, Ash began to peel the package open, blinking as he saw one of the braces that AJ's Pokémon wore to train within. A small note told him it was called a Macho Brace. Huh, Brock mused as Ash and Misty stared at the object in surprise. Guess he really wants a good battle from you at the league. Ash could only smile. Storing the brace away in his backpack, he resolved to get as strong as he could before the Pokémon League, his way. Ash collapsed into a booth with a groan, leaning against the corner as his hat fell to cover his eyes. A giggle caught his attention, making him look up a ND glare at Leaf and Misty across the table. What's so funny? He asked snippily, absently scratching Pikachu's ear as the mouse Pokémon nudged him from the bench. You act like you've been through hell and back. Leaf pointed out with a smirk. Seriously, how much could have happened to you since you left Cerulean, really? Quite a lot, actually, Misty chimed in. Besides what happened with AJ, which we told you about before. I still say he sounds cute, Leaf cut in, giggling as Misty flustered at her. Yeah, we dealt with a few other things along the way, Ash muttered. He paused as Brock approached, smiling and shifting to let his friend sit. Food's on the way guys, the pewter trainer said as he relaxed into the booth. What are we talking about? Leaf wants to know about what we did on the way here, Ash answered. Leaning against the corner again. You guys mind telling her about Bulbasaur first? I'm gonna grab a quick nap. Leaf blinked in surprise as, just like that, Ash fell into a near-instant sleep coma. Wow, that's really creepy, she muttered. Yeah, I'm never gonna get used to that, Misty sighed before turning to leave. So, Bulbasaur's story. As if on cue, he Pokemon in question wandered in from outside, the teal-skinned frog-like Pokemon looking up at Misty as its name was said. Soar. Oh, hi Bulbasaur. Misty greeted Bulbasaur kindly, gently scooping the seed Pokemon into her lap and gently stroking the large, green bulb on its back, causing Bulbasaur to let out a sound almost akin to purring. So we just passed by Pokemon Tech, didn't really bother going inside since there wasn't anything for us to do there, and we ended up a little lost in the woods. Ash, Misty and Brock looked around at the numerous Pokemon in the secret village they had stumbled upon. The sheer number of Pokemon around, each and every one of them supposedly mistreated and abandoned by their old trainers. It really breaks your heart, huh? Ash mused, kneeling down as an Oddish wandered past. Reaching out to gently pet it, he flinched back as the village's protector, Bulbasaur, leapt in between them and growled at him. Okay, geez. Sorry, I was just trying to be friendly. Please don't mind Bulbasaur, Melanie, the caretaker of the village, offered apologetically. She knelt down to Bulbasaur, gently stroking its bulb and causing it to calm considerably. He's very suspicious of strangers. And for good reason. I can understand that, Brock mused. If Bulbasaur was abandoned like the rest of these Pokemon, it's reasonable that it wouldn't take very kindly to more trainers showing up. Melanie nodded in agreement. Yes, Bulbasaur has been here the longest of any of the Pokemon here. I think it was originally given as a starter Pokemon. Ash blinked in surprise. You mean you came from Professor Oak's lab? He asked, looking down at Bulbasaur. When Bulbasaur bared its teeth at the name, Ash sighed, dropping to sit down in front of Bulbasaur a short distance away. Please, don't blame the professor. Some people aren't the nicest, that's true, but Professor Oak had no way of knowing. I'm sure if he could see what became of you, he'd have nothing but apologies to give. Bulbasaur stared at him for a time, even after Melanie stepped away, before seeming to let out a sigh. Bulba, it spat, looking aside, and Ash could only give a sad smile. For what it's worth, the young Pallet hopeful said, holding his hand out to Bulbasaur imploringly. I'm sorry. For everything that happened to you, and every other Pokemon here. Ash held his hand out for a moment, waiting patiently. His smile widening as Bulbasaur slowly extended a vine towards him. Just as the seed Pokemon seemed like it was going to accept his apology, however, a great crash to the side threw them both off balance. As the familiar lines reached his ears, Ash grit his teeth angrily, glaring at Team Rocket standing atop what looked to be an entire stadium roof, transported by a number of hot air balloons and dropped not far from Melanie's cabin. Not you three again, he spat. Don't you ever give up. This village is a royal smorgasbord of Pokemon to pilfer. Jessie called out, grinning widely. A pitiful Pokemon payday. James added, laughing at his own joke. Enough chatter. Meowth cut in. Deployin' da super suction hose. As Meowth hit a button on a boxy remote, a long, industrial-looking hose snaked its way out of the sealed stadium roof, seemingly controlled by the remote as it pointed towards the village and switched on. Everyone, get to cover. Brock cried, and the group rushed to herd all the injured Pokemon into Melanie's hut. Go now, Onix. With a flash of light, Brock's Onix appeared, wrapping itself around the hut as its great bulk worked protect the Pokemon within from the high winds. Wait, we're missing someone. Melanie cried, looking around. Look, Misty shouted, pointing towards the hose. They got Oddish. Before he could think further, Ash rushed out of the cabin, sprinting after the small, purple Pokemon as it tumbled end over end through the air in fear. He blinked as he looked down, spotting Bulbasaur at his heels. Bulbasaur, use Vine Whip. Ash cried, leaping to wrap his arms protectively around Oddish and feeling the hose's suction take him up. Moments later, a pair of sturdy vines wrapped around his waist, Santo, PPing him from being sucked up completely. The rush of the wind past his ears drowned out all other sounds, but he held tight, twisting around to turn his back to Team Rocket's machine. Locking eyes with Bulbasaur, Ash saw the seed Pokemon struggling to keep him from flying back. Making a decision, Ash slipped Oddish into Bulbasaur's vines, giving the startled Pokemon a nod before wriggling free. His grip and flying backwards towards Team Rocket's machine. What's he doing? James asked in confusion, squinting to watch as the young pallet trainer twisted in the air, glaring at Team Rocket in determination. Reaching for his belt, Ash produced a Pokeball in each hand, tossing both high into the air in an attempt to clear the range that Team Rocket's machine could cover. With 2 flashes of light, Fearow and Pidgeotto appeared in the air. "Pidgeotto, use Whirlwind," Ash cried, even as Fearow dove towards him, using its powerful wings to push through the powerful winds of Team Rocket's machine and grab its trainer. Pidgeotto's Whirlwind served to help, pushing against the current of the machine's suction to give Fearow a boost and help it escape the pull. As Ash rose above the machine, suspended by Fearow's talons with Pidgeotto at his side, he glared angrily at Team Rocket. "Give it up," he demanded as his Pokémon swooped towards the top of the machine. As Fearow released him, he dropped into a roll, coming to a stop in a kneeling position. Jessie and James gulped nervously, backing up slowly as Ash's Pokémon took up offensive positions between their trainer and the villains. "Wow," Leaf gasped, eyes wide in surprise as she looked to Ash, who had stirred from his nap and was now feeding his Bulbasaur with pellets of Pokémon food. "So how did you win?" Ash looked up, King slowly for a moment before seeming to register what had been asked. "Oh," Fearow tore up the hose while Pidgeotto sent Team Rocket flying with another whirlwind. "We're still not sure where the stadium roof came from. But I think Melanie said if the authorities couldn't get it removed and returned she'd try and convert it into a Pokémon rescue center." As Misty and Brock nodded along, Leaf sat back and marveled at the idea. "Wow, she sounds like a really great person," she muttered, before frowning. "So wait, how did you end up with Bulbasaur?" Smirking slightly, Ash rubbed Bulbasaur between its ears affectionately. "Well, it turns out Bulbasaur wasn't actually Melanie's Pokémon, so when I asked it to join me, it agreed." He paused, chuckling as Bulbasaur nudged his hand. "Of course, I had to prove myself first," he added. Pikachu battled Bulbasaur, and in the end, we ended up with a brand new friend. Leaf leaned back in her seat, whistling in amazement. "Well, congrats," she offered eventually, grinning widely. "But what about the other 2? Glancing out the window, Ash watched as his other Pokémon played in the Pokémon Center's garden, his Fearow and Beedrill calmly watching over both of his other newest additions fondly. "Well, the next one I met was Squirtle." Ash leaned against the boulder calmly, his arms bound behind his back with more ropes keeping him from moving away. On either side of him, Brock and Misty were also bound, shouting at the gang of rebellious Squirtle that had captured them angrily. Turning his head, Ash locked eyes with his Pikachu, who writhed in discomfort within the cage the Squirtle had trapped it in. Enough. The cave fell silent at Ash's outburst, the Squirtle's leader looking to him in shock as Brock and Misty exchanged a worried glance. "Listen," Ash continued, much calmer though clearly still with an edge to his voice. "I don't know why you're doing this. From what I'd heard, you guys were sticking to harmless pranks in all your troublemaking." He paused, glaring at the Squirtle squad disapprovingly. "But that doesn't matter right now. What does matter is that my Pikachu is very sick, and I need to get him some medicine. Now you can either let me go so I can take care of my Pokémon, or I'm going to get very upset." At first, 4 of the Squirtles began laughing at Ash, clearly not taking him seriously. Their laughter died down, however, when the leader remained quiet, keeping its eyes locked on Ash's fierce gaze for a moment before seeming to nod in assent. After a moment's hesitation, the other Squirtle scrambled forwards to release Ash, who knelt down to inspect Pikachu immediately after. With the Squirtle surrounding and watching him carefully, Ash knew he couldn't risk trying to let Pikachu out just yet. But after a moment's time to inspect his partner, Ash sighed. "Brock, you know more about medicine than me, what do you think?" the young trainer asked, picking the cage up despite the Squirtle's immediate protest and holding Pikachu up for Brock to see. Brock hummed, looking over Pikachu's form intently. "You're definitely going to need to get Pikachu a super potion, and soon," he answered eventually. "It's very weak, and it looks like it may have swallowed some of the river water when it fell in. It might be dehydrated too." Nodded, Ash returned the cage to the stone it was resting on before turning to the Squirtle. "I'm going to get Pikachu some medicine," he said, his tone bartering no question. "I'll be back in an hour or 2. The Squirtle's leader glared up at him defiantly before glancing at Pikachu. Seeming to sigh, Squirtle nodded, before gesturing at Ash and then his friends while talking in its own way. Watching for a moment, Ash nodded. Understood, he said with a nod. If I'm not back in 2 hours, you'll do unspeakable things to Misty's hair. What? As Misty began raving angrily at the Squirtle, Ash took the chance to duck out of the cave. Looking around to get his bearings, he sighed. Realizing that he had no idea where he was and instead releasing Pidgeotto and Fearow from their Pokeballs. Do either of you think you can carry me while you fly? He asked, to which Fearow let out a proud cry. Good. Fearow, you and I are going to try and find a pharmacy so we can get some medicine for Pikachu. Pidgeotto, can you find a place to hide and keep an eye on the cave? I've got a bad feeling about this whole situation. Giving a one-winged salute, Pidgeotto replied with a proud chirp before taking wing and roosting in a nearby tree, making sure to hide itself within the foliage while keeping a good view of the area. Nodding in satisfaction, Ash carefully clambered onto Fearow's back, patting his Pokémon on the side when he was settled and holding on tightly as the large avian took to the skies. It didn't take long for the two to find a small wooden shack with a sign outside proclaiming it to be an all-natural pharmaceutical store, where Ash ducked in and quickly explained his situation. Nodding in understanding, the kindly old man apologized, having no super potions but instead handing Ash a small pouch of ground-up herb powders, which he assured would help just as well. Quickly rushing back to the cave, Ash had Fearow set them down a short distance away, feeling his anger rising as he saw a very familiar hot air balloon anchored just outside of the cave entrance. Noting Pidgeotto in the distance, Ash signaled for his Pokémon to remain hidden, slowly sneaking his way closer. What do you mean you let the twerp go? Ash paused, frowning as he heard Jessie's outburst. Soon after, he saw Team Rocket storming out of the cave, Pikachu's cage carried under James's arm as Meowth hung back, seemingly playing translator for the Squirtle. I can't believe this, James muttered angrily, casually tossing Pikachu into the balloon's basket. From his position behind the basket, Ash carefully clambered inside, retrieving his Pokémon with a signal to stay quiet. He paused when turning to escape, however, spotting a pile of mysterious black orbs out of the corner of his eye and gasping in shock when upon closer inspection, the massive payload of bombs told Ash clearly what Team Rocket's plan was. Wait, Tuip's comin' back. Meowth cried suddenly, and Ash cursed himself for taking too long. Soon. We gotta get movin'. You're not going anywhere. Ash shouted angrily, standing up in the basket and hefting one of Team Rocket's bombs threateningly. Mind explaining what these were for? And what did you do to trick these Squirtle into working for you crooks? Huh. Team Rocket's faces paled visibly as they saw one of their own bombs threatened against them, but quickly rallied themselves. A series of threats and grandstanding were thrown Ash's way, none of which the young trainer paid much attention to. Will you just shut up? Ash cried suddenly, before turning to the Squirtle squad. Don't you see? They were just using you. Trying to use your cleverness to get what they wanted. They were going to blow you all up as soon as they got their way, and they wouldn't have thought twice about it. Shock and horror flashed across each of the Squirtle's faces, each one slowly turning to their leader for guidance, only to flinch back at the expression of barely contained fury it held. Squirtle! It cried out suddenly, and as one. The Squirtle squad turned around, took deep breaths, and unleashed a volley of powerful water guns, sending Team Rocket off their feet to crash into the basket of their balloon just as Ash leapt out of the way. Cradling Pikachu in his arms and having dropped the bomb back into the basket with the others. Team Rocket landed in a heap, groaning in pain before quickly scrambling to escape as more water guns came flying their way. Slowly the balloon raised into the sky, and Jessie rounded on her team angrily. Blow those impudent Squirtle out of the history books, she ordered angrily, positively fuming in anger. James gave a quick nod of agreement before bending down to grab a bomb, only to freeze. Guys, he muttered in fear, slowly backing up as much as he could. They're armed. What? Meowth yelped, leaping onto the edge of the basket. How many? All of them. On the ground, Ash watched as Team Rocket's balloon exploded, sending the trio blasting through air and out of sight once again as debris rained down. As a particularly large chunk began hurtling towards the Squirtle, who had turned their back to retreat into their hideout once more, Ash shout. Ed a warning before rushing to intercept. He managed to scare most of the Squirtle into action, watching as they rushed out of the way, though their leader tripped over a loose stone and rolled onto its shell, kicking helplessly as it tried to roll back onto its feet. Thinking quickly, Ash threw himself over Squirtle's body, shielding it from harm with his own. Bracing himself for the impact, Ash waited, only for it to never come. Looking up, he saw Fearow and Pidgeotto flapping their wings furiously, a combination of whirlwind and mirror moves sending the debris scattering to the ground elsewhere. After that, the Squirtle squad let us go, Ash said, finishing his story and taking a sip of his drink. Their leader followed us when we left though, and it turned out it wanted to join my team. I caught it, asked who wanted a break, and swapped it into rotation after sending Pidgeotto back to Professor Oak. Leaf nodded along before seeming to realize something, looking outside at Ash's Pokémon again. Who did you send back for Bulbasaur then? She asked. Clefairy, Ash answered readily. And Butterfree decided to take a break to let Charmander come along. You'll never guess how we found him, by the way. Looking between the group as their moods turned sour, Leaf swallowed the lump that formed in her throat nervously. Do I want to? She asked, unsure. Ash sighed. What do you Ian, you abandoned your Charmander out there. Ash cried angrily, glaring in fury at the young man sat on one of the Pokémon Center's communal sofas. With deep blue hair, a pink shirt, and brown vest and pants. Damian Cross glared defiantly up back at Ash as though his question was a great insult. That weak little lizard could barely scotch a Rattata. He sneered derisively. What use have I got for something like that? That's awful. Misty cried, torn between anger and dismay. That poor Charmander trusted you to look after it, and this is how you treat it. And what gives you the right to judge me for it? Damian demanded. Some loser from my hometown and his loser friends. I should clobber you all right now for even bothering me with this nonsense. Ash balled his fists. Misty grit her teeth. Brock stepped forward, dwarfing the abrasive trainer with his size alone. I suggest you stop shouting at my friends, the pewter trainer muttered darkly, his face a schooled, neutral expr. Eshin despite the venom dripping from his voice. I don't care for your attitude. Oh yeah, Damian demanded hotly, reaching for one of the Pokeballs piled up in front of him on the table. And who's gonna make me? Tensions in the room rose to a fever pitch, as though all hell were about to break loose, before a crack of thunder drew everyone's attention outside. Rain hammered down on the window. As the winds rattled the glass in the frames, the first stages of that night's storm coming on as quick as a flash. Well, looks like it won't be a problem much longer, Damian joked, laughing at H. His own words before stars exploded across his vision. He felt his body go limp, but stayed upright, held up by Brock with a fist balled into Damian's shirt and another raised to strike the trainer again. You horrid, decrepit, deceitful, dastardly, disgusting excuse for a trainer. Brock snarled in fury. That poor Charmander is no doubt going to try and weather the storm just because it thinks you're coming back for it. And this is how you act. You're lucky I stepped down as a gym leader or I'd have your license before you could hit the floor. That's enough, Nurse Joy cried out, rushing over and separating the two. Only for Damian to collapse into the sofa once more. I understand you're upset, but attacking each other won't help. Now if somebody could go and retrieve that Charmander, I can treat it here. But the longer you argue the more risk that Pokemon's life is going to be at. Brock took a deep, calming breath before nodding. You're right, he said with a sigh. I'm sorry. Come on guys, let's, turning around. Brock froze. Where's Ash? The doors to the center slammed shut, the force of the outside winds carrying them closed far faster than they were ever designed to handle and shattering the glass window. Sharing a glance, Brock and Misty rushed after their friend, following the trail of deep footprints in the mud-laden path until they came across the large boulder, where they had originally found the abandoned Charmander. To their surprise, they found Ash cradling Charmander to his chest, hunched over the fire type with his Fearow balanced precariously on his back. Wings spread to try and block the rainfall as much as possible. Ash! Misty cried as Ash leapt from the boulder to join them again, pausing while Fearow settled itself again. What were you thinking? I was thinking that Charmander needed help. Ash shot back, shouting over the howling winds. Come on, we have to get back. Nodding and turning back, the group moved as quickly as they dared. Misty and Brock both shedding their waterproofs to try and provide more shelter for the weakened Charmander as Ash simply focused on running. A flash of thunder frightened Ash at its suddenness, causing him to slip in the mud before he could find his footing again, leaving him with a leg covered in mud. As soon as they reached the Pokémon Center again, Nurse Joy took Charmander from them and rushed it to an emergency room for treatment, leaving the trio in the lobby feeling anxious for the fire-type's safety and at a loss for what to do. A quick glance told them Damien had moved on, likely retiring to his room for lack of care. And with a sigh Ash suggested they do the same for whatever rest they could get. After a brief shower and a trip to the communal laundry room, Ash returned to the trio's shared room to find Brock and Misty both sitting up in their beds, clearly unable to sleep. Sighing as he tossed his backpack onto his own bed, Ash joined them, knowing full well he wouldn't be getting any sleep himself that night. "Cards, anyone?" he asked eventually, if only to alleviate the silence in the room. After a moment, Misty nodded, sliding to the floor to join him. Brock joined silently a moment later. But despite the ongoing game he was clearly distracted, constantly looking to the door in a clear hope of any news. As the night drew on with no word from Joy, the trio eventually decided to at least try to retire, hoping that sleep would bring the next day that much faster and provide them with some news. As Ash expected, instead of sleep, he found himself lay back in his bed staring at the ceiling for most of the night, only moving when the early rays of the morning sun began to sneak through their curtains. Getting up and changing, Ash left the room to go collect his clothes from the night before, folding up what was dry and storing the rest in a plastic bag. Returning to his room, he found Misty asleep facing the wall, and Brock sat up in bed staring at the floor. Silently, Ash moved to store his clothes away before turning to Brock. "Coffee?" he asked, and the pewter trainer simply nodded, standing to follow him out to the communal area and then into the cafeteria. Each collected a coffee from the woman running the kitchen, thanking her politely before returning to the communal area. To their surprise, they found Nurse Joy waiting for them, who gave Th.M. a small smile as she beckoned them over. "Charmander's going to be okay," she assured them, drawing sighs of relief from both trainers. "It's very weak for the time being, but with enough time and a good diet, its fire should return brighter than ever. I couldn't track down Damien this morning, so I think he may have left in the night." "Good riddance," Ash spat bitterly, before pausing. "Wait, so what's going to happen to Charmander?" Joy simply sighed. "Well, I can contact the proper authorities, and it can be taken into a foster system to receive the care it needs. Or I can simply discharge it and let it do what it likes. Which will likely mean it'll return to that rock and wait for Damien." She paused, glancing between the two for a moment. "Or, since Charmander is an abandonment case, I have the authority to entrust it to those that brought it in for treatment, as you clearly care for it enough to seek the best for it." Sharing a look, Ash and Brock thought it over for a time. "I'd be willing to take care of Charmander," Ash offered. "If nothing else, I can return it to Professor Oak and maybe he can help it. But it all depends on what Charmander wants." Brock nodded sadly. "Taking it away by force will only breed bitterness, I think," he chimed in. "At the end of the day, Charmander is still loyal to Damien. If it thinks we're trying to take it away from him, Charmander will only respond negatively." Joy sighed. "That's true," she mused, before turning and gesturing towards the recovery rooms. "You're welcome to come and visit it now, it should just be waking up for breakfast. Maybe you could talk to it yourselves." Nodding, Ash and Brock followed Joy towards the wing in question, pausing outside of Charmander's room. "You go, Ash," Brock offered after a moment's thought. "I can provide medical care. But I think you'll be better for Charmander's mental health. You can ease it back into battling if it wants to." "If you're sure," Ash responded, waiting for Brock to nod in confirmation before slowly stepping into Charmander's room. As Joy had said, Charmander was sat up in its bed, a flame-proof sheet under its tail and the flame at the tip flickering, small but strong. "Hey buddy," Ash greeted with a smile, moving to sit next to the bed slowly. Charmander regarded him suspiciously, but made no move to indicate it didn't want him there, which Ash took as a good sign. "Do you know where you are?" Looking around for a moment, Charmander looked back to Ash before nodding. "Char, It spoke, tilting its head curiously. You want to know where Damien is? Ash asked, waiting for Charmander to nod again before sighing. I'm not sure how to say this, Charmander, but Damien's gone. He left you behind on that rock, and he didn't care that you could get hurt in the storm. He's gone, and I don't think he's coming back. Charmander stayed quiet for a moment before turning to look down into its claws silently. Ash stayed quiet, giving the fire type some time to contemplate before speaking again. Listen, there's a few things you can do now, he said, and Charmander looked up at him again. You could be released into the wild, and go live your life your way. You could go into a foster system, and hope another nice trainer wants to adopt you. Or, you could come with me. He paused when Charmander seemed to frown at him. It's up to you, he hastened to assure the flame Pokémon. But if you come with me, I can help you. You can get stronger over time, try and enter battles again if you want to. Or I can transfer you back to Professor Oak, and he can help you get better back in Pallet Town. Or you could just travel with me, and see the world, and you'll never have to battle if you don't want to. It's entirely up to you. Charmander stayed silent, turning to look out of the window again. Ash sighed, standing from his seat. I'll let you rest, he offered. We'll be staying at the center for another day, so if you want to come with me, just come and find me. If not, I'll respect your choice. I hope you feel better soon. With that, Ash turned and left the room, glancing back at Charmander and catching the flame Pokémon staring at him inquisitively. He gave it a smile before pulling the door shut, letting out a tired sigh. The trio of Ash, Brock, and Misty remained in the center for the next day as Ash had promised, spending their time resting from the stresses of the day before. Ash and Brock made use of the battlefield out back, sparring between them to burn off their remaining anger at Damien's actions. As night fell once more and Ash heard nothing from Charmander, he sighed, retiring to his room once more. While Brock and Misty had a much easier time sleeping knowing Charmander was safe and recovering, Ash sat up, staring out of the window lost in his own thoughts. The sight of a flickering light caught his attention, and as he focused, he could see Charmander wandering out onto the battlefield to look around. As he watched, Charmander took a position on the battlefield, seeming to get its bearings and looking back to the trainer's position multiple times. Ash's eyes widened as Charmander took a deep breath and let loose a truly massive, powerful jet of flames into the air with a cry of anguish, lighting up the night sky for a split second before the attack let up and Charmander wandered back into the building. He sat there contemplating for a moment before a quiet knock at his door caught his attention, the light from the hallway bleeding under the crack in the door and revealing two shadows. Moving to open the door, Ash found himself surprised to find Nurse Joy standing there, and Charmander at her side when he looked down. I think somebody has something to ask you, Joy provided with a smile before stepping away and walking off. Ash and Charmander watched her go for a moment before turning to look at each other again. Ash blinked. You've decided. Charmander nodded at him before pointing at the young pallet trainer with a single claw. Charmander, it said insistently. You're coming with me. Ash watched as Charmander seemed to launch into a practiced speech, somehow managing to understand its meaning if not the exact words as he watched the small flaming lizard gesticulate with its arms throughout. Kneeling down, Ash smiled. I promise, I'll always respect your wishes, he assured Charmander. I'll treat you just the same as the rest of my Pokémon, and never ask more of you than I'd be willing to go through myself. He paused, holding a hand out to Charmander calmly. If you want a break, you can get one. If you want to battle, you can battle. If you want to go back to Oak, and look for another trainer, I'll send you along with a hug and a smile. All I ask is your respect in return. Charmander stared at him silently for a moment before slapping its claw into his hand, accepting his handshake and giving a wide, toothy grin. Ash smiled back, leading Charmander back into the room and closing the door behind them before producing a Pokeball from his backpack and offering it to the fire type. Ash looked up as he wrapped up his final story, blinking as he saw Leaf sat across from him. Her face bright red. She sniffled angrily, her hands balled into fists as she blinked back tears. How could he? She demanded hotly. That Charmander trusted him, how could he just do that? Ash sighed, sitting back as the waitress brought their food. I don't know, Leaf, he answered sincerely. We've known Damien for a long time, and he's always been harsh. But this seems like a new low. Even for him. Huffing, Leaf grabbed her fork and speared one of her eggs, shoving it into her mouth hole. Does Gary know about this? She asked after swallowing. Shaking his head, Ash shrugged. I have no idea where he is, he said. Gary took off in his fancy car, remember? He's probably taking different routes to us. The important thing is, Misty cut in. All of these Pokémon have a much better life now, because Ash is a great trainer. She paused, smiling at Ash kindly. He'll care for them in a way their old trainers never could. Right, Brock agreed. And they'll be surrounded by friends and get all the help they might need along the way. Nodding, Ash sat back. I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for watching guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.